Chasin the Racin, powered by Colchester Kawasaki. Part of the Global Moto Group, we supply new Aprilia, Moto Guzzi, Vespa, Royal Enfield, Kawasaki, Sim, Mutt and Benelli motorcycles.
3, 2, 1, and welcome back to Chasin the Racin, episode 151, and we're delighted to be joined by Hudson Kennaugh. How are we doing?
Thanks for having me, boys.
Love the Brandon straight out there.
Yeah, so what's all that about? And go for the next 2 hours.
We just got Hudson's house, and just in time for the MotoGP. Now, this podcast won't be going out for another week, so we'll be kind of like a week old, if you like, but it was kind of good race, that wasn't it?
Perfect timing when you boys turned up, wasn't it? We got to watch the race. It was great. Yeah, it was really, really good.
And I'll tell you what, other than the fact that if you just looked at the results, it might look like a pretty standard race, but if Marquez hadn't knacked the start, I don't know what happened there. Maybe there's that many electronics on them things. Maybe he just didn't have it in the right mode or whatever. But he lost so much time off the start, but then came back through, and I think he was probably only about 3-4 seconds off the win.
Absolutely, yeah, he could have won it. We would have been in a battle for the win, in the end.
Definitely.
And I tell you what, for the future of the show, we've come up with an interesting concept between us, essentially Gogglebox for motorcycle races. I think it'll be a good idea. Do you lads think it could take off?
Out of anyone that you know from racing, who would you want to watching MotoGP?
I don't know, it'd be difficult because I don't know, you could end up in a scrap, couldn't it?
That's what we're aiming for, Michelle. No, but you came up with the perfect concept, though. You'd need someone from each different discipline, almost.
Sure.
You know what I mean? You'd need like a crew chief, and then, we've got 2 choices here: stock 1,000 champions, and then you could get a classic race or all sorts. But you just need a lot of wine, some narcotics of some sort, and just really spice it up. Just make it mental.
Like I said before, I think now Rusty's obviously hung his leathers up. There's such a dynamic with people pulling in different. Chrissy was just worried about all the bets that he had on today, so you could see he was pushing forward. He had no favourite. It was just whoever he had money on.
I tell you what, this boy doesn't have any vice. He doesn't drink. He doesn't smoke. No, nothing. I think you're a bit of a secret gap. Maths, the connections there.
Definitely. He's trying to do the ratio. That's what he's trying to do. He had a spread bet on you. Just tell you it's about the maths, not about the money.
MotoGP Fantasy League. It's and I tell you what, I was just checking out our league last night. We've got getting over 300 people in our league now, and there's a few now and again when you scroll through. There's some people put their actual name, so you're like, oh, there's so and so, but some are like have it racing type thing. You don't know who they are, but I'm quite happy with that race. I had a few of the top 10 in, so I can't complain.
I would just like to remind everyone, it is a free entry to our fantasy league on this side of things, so if you just want to jump in, go for it.
Whoever wins our fantasy league at the end of the year, we'll do something special for maybe have them as a guest on the podcast or something.
Oh, there's an idea.
Good, wouldn't it? Yeah.
Mind you, no one else will probably get a really shy, timid person. Like, what do you make of it? Just nothing for an hour.
Just get grilled by him. How did you work it out? Tell me.
Yeah, you've done me over.
To be fair, do you know, if out of that league, if whoever wins, it does actually mean if they were putting monetary bets on the choices that they took, they would be massively up. In order to win a league out of say 300 people, even the top 10, 20 people would all effectively be making money if they were. So
on a spread bet,
it's almost like a good way of actually testing how, because I think I know quite a bit about MotoGP, but when you pick your favourites and you're watching the nowhere, you kind of get the firm realisation that you don't actually know as much as you think.
Absolutely. Well, I think this year is also wide open. We were talking about before the bike specs and just a little bit of what's came, and obviously picking on the Brad Binder story from a few rounds ago in the wets, he could have won that. The story coming from his camp is that obviously they had a failure with the rear ride height, was stuck down the whole race. So Marquez had a failure today on the start, arguably cost him the win, and then Brad had that, and his teammate won. So and he's in the same league as him in the
They're
West.
looking I think they're banning them from 2023. They're banning the changeable ride heights that are used on the straight, so they can keep them for the starting devices. Yeah, but. I think Ducati were the first to use it, but now quite a few of the brands are, where when the bikes get onto a straight, they drop by a good few mil, and obviously it's just less air to go through, so it's therefore more aerodynamic. Yeah. But I think is it a mechanical device, or does it automatically come off when you hit the brakes?
When you hit the brakes, it's been automatically come off, and that was the problem. It didn't come off. For him, that was the issue, and then you can't release it. So it's meant to automatic. You set it, and then it's meant to automatically come off.
Is this detailed into the regs of Freetech? Are you allowed ride? Are you allowed ride height?
Don't you joke? We already busted a team with shortening their dog bones on one of their bikes on the Suzuki's. Had to go around, and you could see they were homemade. You're like, those aren't original lads. And then they got the original ones out the toolbox. You're like, come on. You can see it was like that as well. It was like they've been watching too much MotoGP. They might have stamped runs on the side of it. Do you know what I mean? And we're like, oh yeah, we got it from him. But they were definitely trying to own, but it wasn't adjustable. It was just like a chopper. So
what is the best excuse you've heard? You know, for like a team who's turned up, cheated, and they're like, what is the best one-liner that you've heard?
When we
aborted like that.
We no, better than that. My mechanic said it'll be okay.
No one's a mechanic on the team.
Yeah, no, he's not there. But then you know him. You know, sort of heard his name, but he's not. He's definitely not around when they say that. It's like...
Now, a lot of people that are listening to this might be familiar with your name from. To be fair, you've covered quite a lot of like different racing, in terms of the classes, and whether it's like from the road racing in the Isle of Man TT or from the short circuit with like the likes of BSB, the classic stuff, and obviously more recently the Freetech endurance race, the no insurance endurance, which has been a massive phenomenon for British racing. Really, it's something new that's came on the scene over the last few years, and it's the popularity is like unbelievable. So I guess. For anybody that's listening that isn't familiar, where do you begin? Go from the start. Obviously, you haven't got a local accent, so do you want to go from there? Like, so you grew up in South Africa
from the beginning. Yeah. Basically, the backstory to me and the way I ended up over here was obviously motorbike racing. So I started motocross as a young kid.
Can I interrupt you one second? Yeah. You have an opportunity to recreate yourself. Have you ever thought of that? I'm just thinking
I could rewrite it.
You could, couldn't you?
I'm still going to tell you about who I punched at TT. Don't worry.
All right, we'll get to that. Yeah, brilliant.
But yeah, started there. Just I don't know. The cute side of that was basically obviously in South Africa the gardens are quite big, so I got a bike for a birthday because my dad, wanted to spend less time with me probably at the time, and then my mum got angry because I destroyed the garden. And went to a racetrack with him, and he was big into horse racing at the time and stuff, and it was quite funny. He picked an old Rover. He picked the bike at the back of the Rover, put it down, he's quite a big guy, kick-started it, was in his suit because he was going to the evening horse racing and said, "But we've got to be finished here by 3:00. And then there was races on that day. I'd bought a big green hood and helmet, got pictures from it. And that was my first race on a JR50 Suzuki, little Suzuki 50s. And went from there. I sort of didn't shut up about it. I think I got a trophy in the post because we left like before the racing finished. Probably best try, or I fell off a few times, maybe a crasher or something. And that was it. And then motocross till I was about early teens, and I crossed over. I showed you boys the bike earlier on. That was the first full size, which is essentially what the concept of Freetech is now. So I've gone full circle. In those days, everything was two-stroke. Got into that, and started doing well. And then if I go through that, we grew up. So myself, the likes of Cork Bellington, Shane Norville, not the Binders. Binders grew up inland, but basically all the coastal boys. There's no racetrack for 450 miles. No actual circuit. So there's ad hoc tracks that get licensed by our version of the ACU, and we did a lot of street racing. So we used to have like 3/4 of our year was street racing,
and that's like road racing, like street
proper
racing,
like TT, but just a couple of miles, not 37 miles. So and that little bike you saw, one of my early races in my first year, a marshal went to help another guy broke down the straight, and he got all that Harris fencing, and he's fair size marshal, so he tried to pick the bike up, but as he picked the bike, he bent down and went right into the track, and I was tucked down. Moved across and it hit my hand. It broke the clip on, and he spun up and went in there. So all these crazy things used to happen. Lamppost with a hay bale strapped to it. There's loads of videos of all that sort of stuff. So we was lucky. My mom videotaped most of it. So I get to watch it back and think that's a crazy way to live your early teens.
So your first road race over here must be, this is really safe. Yeah. This is for me. This feels like a British meeting.
So the story was a lot of good riders. Because we had the other thing about South Africa is the apartheid era. So there was a big ban, obviously, till 1994. Where South African riders couldn't come over because of the international sporting rigs, because they had apartheid, which obviously was like a racial oppression. So the first guys to come out was Shane after that ban was lifted. So there was actually a block where no one was allowed to travel, but like what's happening in Russia now, with the Russian athletes. So the athlete was, probably a nice guy, but wasn't allowed to travel. So we actually had a pool of really good riders. And then my story of not having a racetrack near us, we used to drive hundreds of miles to the big tracks like we know in the UK. We got Kyalami, Killarney, Swartkops, loads of big tracks, East London. So all these ex-Grand Prix tracks that all held Formula One races through the decades. We drive through the night. Our longest drive is 1,200 miles to one of the national tracks. And the national series was about 10 rounds. That little bike, I think, used to have a 5 or 6 round 50cc national, and you'd cover all those tracks. So you do some of the short tracks, and then the rest would be like long tracks. So that was like the growth to that, but you didn't know any different. That was just normal. That was just normal. You didn't know about somewhere here where Donington, where we're sitting now, is 10 miles down the road. Didn't exist.
What was diesel price back then? Like, you know what I mean? Jesus, imagine doing a 500 trip mile now. You'd be like, we're not going. We can't afford it.
Petrol's pretty cheap, but still, it's a huge trip. That's
ridiculous.
And all the African. So that's where they've all had that. Do you know what I mean? Because even if you lived inland, you might have had 3 or 4 racetracks, but you would have travelled. So like being on the road, it wasn't really a big issue, but you were still in your country where everything tasted the same. There are differences, but yeah. So that was, and then the Durban boys were a bit more hardy, shall we say, because of the sort of, you felt you're making more of a sacrifice, and then when you got to a long track, you took the opportunity because you couldn't go there on Tuesday or Wednesday to practice, and yeah, so did all that, and then some of the early classic stuff. So then we won all the short tracks, and then went to, at the time, the South African two strokes. When I did GP 125s, but then 2 strokes faded out as everything went to 4 strokes. So sort of hindered everyone in that era's career because you had to change over, and I was just in that phase where it was wrong. So I went and rode some production RGV 250s for a few years because you thought 2 strokes. There was no thinking 2 strokes might come back. I don't know what we thought. We just went and rode those because that's all we knew. Yeah. And you looked at a 600 and you thought that's really big, but actually the modern era, you just jump on one, Yeah. I think I was like 15 at the time. So, yeah, and then when we got to 16 or 17 years old, eventually went on to 600 Suzuki. My dad went and financed it as a delivery bike for his business. I took it with no license. We used to do, so all the motorbike road riding is on breakfast runs. So everyone meets at the bike shops and it goes on an outride, but it's a unauthorized road race where they know. But the problem, so I got my ass handed to me the first time luckily I came back because a few of the boys were a bit, sketchy. And this was meant to run the bike, and I came and said, I'll never be good at this because I got drilled by all these road guys on the thing, but they knew the roads, those back roads. But yeah, literally came back and went up to a race a few weeks later, the national at Kyalami. It was the first round, and no testing, none of that nonsense. Got there, and the clock of the course, the scrutineer as a bike runs away, doesn't give us a sticker, says it'll be around. Clock of the course comes up and says, it's all been race prep by the dealership. Yeah. And they said, you can't ride that, lad. I said, why? And he goes, it's got road tires on. We turned up with the OEM road tires on to because they were Pirellis or, a brand, whatever comes on the bike. He says that you have to run one of these, there were brands options, but you had to run one of these 3 brands and not that, and that's a road tire. Well, they said, can't you just go and do a few laps on it like that? No. You have to change. He trudges off to the Dunlop garage or the Pirelli garage, gets a set of tires put on, still had the standard silencer. Anyway, went on road and did all right. I think the field was like 35, so like top boys, and I think I was like inside the top 30 and getting better. And he said, if you do such lap time, I'll buy you an end can. It was a bloke selling an Arrow end can.
Incentive is there.
Yeah, and then so the reason for those stories is that basically when you don't know, it's quite funny that when you get to stage now, where knowledge is quite strong, especially in my career, you quite knowledgeable about motorcycles, and I was very technically knowledgeable. I just worked in the trade. I did motorcycle engineering, so I knew how to rebuild stuff. But obviously, you didn't know about, we were talking about tires earlier. You didn't know about tire technology. You just saw one and another. So that was it. And then, the uplift, the quick version of that story is in that year, the top Suzuki rider got injured. And I eventually finished 3rd on our bike at one of the rounds at Fakisa, at the MotoGP track. On our bike, and Suzuki came and said, this chap's injured, we'll support you the rest of the year, and basically help fund and a little bit, so you don't even know about, basically you could run that 600. And then at the end of the year, I was in a factory Suzuki team that ran 2, it was like a young development team, and throughout that year we did better and better, and I think I won around. And then the next year the rules changed because that was the premier class, was 600s, and next year they had one more year of 600s after that, and I won quite a few races, but the Yamahas were winning everything. And the year after that, they went to 1000s, which was 2004, and I won every single race on the 1000s on the Suzuki. I won every race, barring the first race, which I won on track, but I lost because they'd stopped the race somewhere through, and on the technicality, I lost it. But basically, won every single race against like Sheridan, Marias. Those guys were all racing, and then Suzuki funded us to go overseas. And the other interesting part is you used to get paid. When you won, you got paid. Those days, I'd make £3,000 a weekend in 2004.
Is that like converted?
It's converted.
Wow.
And it literally, because what had happened was, because of what had happened in the 90s, the manufacturers had all really, it all been focused internally, and the riders had been focused internally. And what actually started happening was, everyone says that you shouldn't have an argument with someone. Well, there's two reasons for, not an argument, but that sort of rivalry.
Yes.
You know what I mean? But that rivalry drives two things. It drives your team and your sponsors, yeah? Because we walk around really, really friendly with everyone. If Ducati love Yamaha, not going to put all the effort in, are they? So the manufacturers had a long history. All the MDs of all the manufacturers, like, obviously went to conferences together, but secretly, how could they beat each other? They didn't care about the golf course. They needed their jockeys to do the job. And we'd had a lot of money from cigarettes before, when my two-stroke era was around. The top guys were getting paid like Winston and these cigarette companies still exist, and Marlboro and all the rest of it. But then it changed to mobile phones. So we had the likes of Vodafone, or it was called Vodacom there, Cell C. So all those new technologies came in, took up their helm with the finances. So the teams had an unlimited budget. There were stock bikes, there were super stock rigs, basically. Yeah. But we had like all the suspension from Europe and the Corona team at the time.
So is that essentially like
they wouldn't be popular,
a BSB but South Africa superbikes?
Yeah, but no electronics, so still standard electronics there. Yeah. So like European Superstock was at the time.
And does that, is it mainly riders from South Africa, or does it attract riders from the rest of Africa?
So there was a contingent of like Australians used to come over. It was a bit Southern Hemisphere led, but there was in the 600 days just before I was around, but just before my time, there was I think it was like a transatlantic challenge. So they had British riders come over. Yes. They had Australian riders, and what used to happen, there was so much money that the factory teams would literally, if it was today, Chrissy would come from the UK and say he's on BMW, and there was no BMWs then, but there was BMW team.
For example,
the factory team, he'd get given one bike. He'd be given, you choose your bike, and you'd literally go, I'll have that one, and they were the same. So then the factory rider would have, so it'd be all that spare bikes, and then they'd race for a decent amount of prize money. And that's
what was the prize money then?
Yeah, it was still strong. It was before. It was stronger than that £3,000. It was. I mean, everything was paid as well. Like your whole trip, everything was all. So you had a free holiday as well.
So in terms of
and cigarettes,
your sort of late teens, early 20s, was that a career for you, or were you just kind of making a little bit on the side with the racing?
Yeah, well, until I went sort of pro with Suzuki, there was no income. It was all dad funded, so to speak. And my family was middle income, so we had,
What did your dad do for a living?
He owned a gearbox company for cars back then. So he trained in America and come back before he had me, and that was he was in quite a unique position really, and he had quite a strong business from that. So he was mechanically minded, but he used to help. Obviously, the racetrack he was fully involved, but with the two strokes like that one you saw there, we sent it off to the two stroke gurus, and they'd rebuild it, but he'd fit it back in and make sure all the brakes and everything were fine.
And at this time, do you know, when you were, say, like for example, when you started winning on the thousands in South Africa, right then, did you have eyes on sort of World Superbikes eventually, or were you thinking BSB or?
Yeah, well, so sorry.
No. Sorry, no, I was just about to say, how apparent was BSB at this time?
Yeah, all of that stuff. It was quite. It was this unique sort of overlap where it's not motorcycle racing as we've known it in the last decade, certainly. And it was a bit of you didn't realize how good you had it at the time. I mean, you obviously with the bank balance just going up vertical all the time, if you're winning, I had that really good year. And even the year before, we won some races. You won a bit of a retainer. I mean, you'd get loads of stuff from it for free. But what Suzuki did, to answer that question, is they had a World Cup at the end of every year. And in 2004, 5 and 6, they basically took their riders to their World Cup all around the country, all around the world. Sorry. So the first year, talking about BSB, this will link into the rest of our stories. Was in I think the first year was Manicourt in France. So again, you've done well. I hadn't won the championship then. I'd done quite well in the 600s, and they raced 750s because Suzuki were obviously big on the Gixxer 750. So we got to Manicourt, and I met the likes of Steve Brogan. He was the British one of the British riders. I think Ben was there as well, from Gearlink rider Ben Wilson. Yeah, he was there. I'm trying to think. So that was the British contingent. But then you had, and it was like I was the single guy from South Africa, but they had like a 3-man British team. I can't remember who the third guy was in that 3-man French team, 3-man Italian team. So stacked grid. And then you arrived there, and Suzuki just had all these, prepared race bikes, but stock, and you just got your number and a key, and they were all the same. So yeah, it was, and Michelin tires and all that. So we knew what it was before. So we'd done a bit of testing on the tires and all that sort of stuff. Anyway, it was freezing. It was the end of the year, freezing cold, many corner. I didn't make. I think I qualified second row, so like top 6 or something. But I pulled off and didn't make the warm up lap. Crashed. There's 2 races, thank goodness. But I crashed as I went into the left on the warm up lap because new Michelin, but Michelin's without. And we sat there forever, no warmers. Plus, in South Africa, my whole crew had come. So like the whole team had flown out with you. So we were doing really well because where we were, and fell off. Mended the bike, and then the next race, I think I finished 3rd overall. So me and Steve had a massive battle. So it was the first, and then if you look back through my career, someone like Steve, but we like raced against each other, like from then to like when we both retired, the whole time. So it was quite cool. But yeah, that was year 1 at Manicourt. So yeah, and then you earn some dough. Not make it, but there was more of the experience. But from that, so that was Suzuki were really pushing forward. Then the next year was America, rode Atlanta, and I did well there. I finished 3rd overall. I think I finished in the top 3 of all the races. But Javier Flores he won that. So and we was close though. And there was me, Javier, and a Yank. I can't remember the American's name, but we were like the ones battling. And then the next year was the Jigsaw European Cup, and I'd won. So it was 2005, and then that went in line with the World Superbikes. So they had 5 rounds or 4 or 5 rounds with them. So it was. I can't remember all the rounds, but it was basically Valencia, Misano, Manicourt, and there was one in Germany. So it's 4 or 5 rounds. And I raced that. So and then I raced South Africa as well because we were still earning dough there. And then I won that championship in 2005. And then, so until then, it was like a fairy tale scenario and heavily funded. So like the main moral of that story is that without Suzuki and what they were doing, and Suzuki South Africa, because they, the air flights, you can't just. I couldn't drive. As much as it was impossible. So everything was being funded and still a reasonable salary. But you could also tell that the scene in South Africa was starting to sort of equal out to what was probably happening in the rest of the world, if you know what I mean. But you didn't know.
Yeah.
And the mistake you make is that you think, well, that might be dropping off, but then of BSB and stuff like that. And the probably one of the turning points, the sort of not sour, but one of the chip on your shoulder points where you get another one is because I'd won that. I'd qualified for a free ride with All-Star Corona, or the All-Star team in their super stock. So that was like celebrated. We went to Troy Corsa won the World Championship that year, so we were at the party with them. We'd won at Manicourt. We had all the big wigs from Suzuki there, all the big wigs from this. We had this massive party. Went to Valencia testing. Bike was like strangely a lot better than my standard bike from South Africa, but like the clutch was better and little things you're thinking was meant to be the same, you know what I mean? But anyway, it was way better. And on that testing sheet, it was a bit damp, and at Valencia, and the superbikes were testing, and we were in the same group, and I was like top 10 on that stock bike, and because of the conditions, not because the ride was good, but the whole thing played out. And then we got summoned to a meeting that afternoon, or after the 2-day test, or whatever it was, and they said, you've got a problem, because my birthday was in January. I was too old before the season started. And they said you can't ride Superstock, and the way the team was set up was, I think they had Foray in the 600, and then they had Troy and Yuki in the bigger bikes, and it was just taken away. I think we got some money and that was it. So I had nothing. So basically had this like massive ascent, all this help, and no one to blame either, because it was just a rule. A
technicality.
And no one thought we'd win either. You know what I mean? Like there were some good riders. I mean, there's some good riders from that championship that went on to ride in World Superbike after that. The Spanish guys did. Or they didn't win World Championships, but they all raced in Superbike.
And do you know when you were coming over to racing, like the European Cup and stuff, were you still based in South Africa and just travel and feature around? Yeah,
only because I was still racing there. So the next year, the 2006 year, I was going to leave South Africa to go to race in Europe, or to stay in Europe. And I remember being at one of the last rounds looking at some motorhomes and the big RVs and stuff, and going, because you didn't get that in South Africa either. You just go in a van. I had a 1600 Nissan pickup or something, and I just drove to race, whatever was cheapest because of the fuel scenario and the distance, And then even when I was like a factory rider, I'd rather drive than fly, because they'd pay your mileage and you make a few coin off that. So you just drive the 1,000 miles just to earn a couple of quid extra in your car.
Hudson, you're taking a while. Yeah, I'm taking the long way.
The long way, yeah. That was all through the mountains.
Down the motorway and you get the mileage.
And so when that ride dropped through, I guess you'd had your eyes opened up to the European scene. Did you manage to secure another ride like over here?
Yeah. So what happened was at the crossover there was I'd met in South Africa the likes of Johnny Towers, but the way I met Johnny was quite a cool story. We were at Cape Town, and the normal like BSB where you've got the tape across the front of the pits, and it was a really windy day, really clear, but really windy anyway. You had all the guys outside their line in pit lane, like a pit lane walk, and all asking questions. And this one chap was asking loads about the corner called Damps, where the wind gets under the bike, and we're talking about that. And he had like intimate knowledge of the pumps, and I was like basically crying about the pumps and the wind and all the rest of it on the 1000. And this eventually the one in Kanks walked over and knew him, and so they introduced and all the rest of it. But I still had no idea of the UK scene. And that was probably a year before this had all gone wrong. So when it had gone wrong, I was talking to lots of people and saying, well, what do I do next year? And he said, listen, let me put some feelers out in the UK. And basically, he sets up the deal with Steve Rogers and myself, off the back of nothing, if that makes sense. And to be fair, Steve was doing nothing at the time, as well. So, yeah, he was the catalyst for it to happen. He said, well, initially we're going to go Suzuki on our own. We're going to just do it. There was a bike shop or whatever down here. And then I think he was up at Steve selling him some leathers or something, and they started chatting about it. Steve said, I wouldn't mind, but the only difference was I had to ride an R1, which, I didn't mind the R1, but because I'd raced against it a lot, I sort of had an opinion that the Suzuki was still better, so, but it was, after chatting and looking at it, it was much easier to do it that way, or much more.
I do remember Steve Rogers talking about it, but I couldn't really remember the story. So did you come over? You were staying in his yard, weren't you?
Yeah.
Racing Superstar.
Yeah. So there was the story to that. There's a couple of things before I got to his yard. Basically, I knew sort of Steve's story. Yeah, exactly. I knew a bit about them, and I spoke to Steve. But Steve, I mean, I'd seen pictures, but the point was, remember, there's no social. Facebook, I think, was brand new then, so there wasn't like it was today. 2006.
I was about to say, what time period are we talking from here? From years of schoolboy motocross, straight over all this, earning miles by swerving your car down the motorway, and then I've got to ask you a question. Coming from South Africa, what was your opinion of BSB? Looking back at that time, was it no, all right, this is going to be a piece of piss, or was it, this is a hard championship, or, what was your opinion at that time?
No, I mean, BSB was definitely, everyone knew about BSB. We didn't get it on TV, so that was probably the one bit that we didn't get. But we, basically, from when I started probably in the 90s to, mid-90s to early 90s to then, I had a subscription for Performance Bike and probably Motorcycle News, I think. And I used to go and pick it up every week. One was monthly, one was weekly. I used to go every week to the same news agents, and it cost a fortune. My mom used to go mad, and I used to, read through the British newspaper magazines, and that was the only, factual communication you had. You knew the guys because they were changing over, and you're watching World Superbikes, and they're talking about the crossover and who was riding, and so there was always this chat. And obviously, you knew, you're talking to people that had been there and done that. So we had a lot of South African guys who had then gone over before, when they were allowed. There was windows when they were allowed in the 80s, and we're talking about the British tracks and how they were really young there. They were 16, 17 and sort of came back in their 20s, and now were 40 or 30s, 40. So there was that chat going on. And then obviously Johnny and Steve not convinced me, but it was a clear option, and it was a clear winner. The only negative is that my mindset was that I'm going to go there and then get back to where I was.
That's what I mean.
And that was probably, in hindsight, through the next couple of years, you didn't really appreciate, also earlier, how you didn't appreciate what you were doing as much as you should have. And also everything from a finance point of view was obviously completely different, because you were just starting again, essentially. And that was a bit of a pill to swallow. So that's where, sometimes I was probably more frustrated than I should have been.
And when you first came over with Steve Rogers, was it a case, did you have a sponsor that were you bringing budget, or were they?
No, Steve, it was literally, I think we had 10 grand from genuine sponsors, and then he was providing the bikes and everything, and then I said I'd provide a mechanic, which I had lined up someone to come with me from South Africa, which ended up never happening. So we then inherited one of the chaps from the shop, which was fantastic. But he said, "Will you build the bikes yourself and stuff?" And I could. We had been actively involved, but I was building all my own stuff, barring my race bikes, if that makes sense. So we knew how to put something together, and then. But it's a bit difficult when they gave me a brand new R1. I'd never stripped an R1 before. So you're trying to find all the little plastic lugs, and road bikes are a nightmare. So once you go through that, I had the space where they currently work now, with that factory team is in that workshop, and I had my own little section and we just cracked on. But the funny story on the way to Steve's before I ever laid eyes on him, we spoke loads of times on the phone and lined it up, and his favorite is drive, everything's drive. Yeah, drive. So I started saying in South Africa, people were like, "What are you saying? What is this drive? What is this?" Because that's slang that no one's ever heard. There, because I was picking it up and talking to him. Anyway, on the way to his, I landed and I was had no one yet. Johnny was in Cape Town, so I went to Johnny's house, spent 7 days there. Went and got a van similar to your boys from Astro Van Centre. Stu went and bought one from him. Bought a caravan from a mate of a friend of a friend here. When I collected the caravan, drove straight to Steve's place. So on the way to Steve's place, I was going over the tops near your neck of the woods, and it was snowing and sleeting. I had my shorts on, flip-flops, and a t-shirt, and I had the heating on full tilt on this Vito. Driving along. I'm thinking, and everyone's telling me every day, "I'll be warmer soon, don't worry." And I'm thinking soon means like there's a cold front. It'll be tomorrow. It means this is like February. You know what I mean? Maybe late January. So like driving along all the way there, and I get to if you go into Fleetwood, it's got the most roundabouts in the whole world. Eventually, it became fun, but when you're trying to get there, and South Africa, there's not lots of roundabouts, so it's like confusing. When you get there, you're like, you got this caravan, you're swaying through. Anyway, sway through the fourth or fifth one, and there's this policeman on a motorbike sitting there in the rain, and it stops snowing by the time you get there because you're near the coast, but definitely snowed your side of the world. And got this policeman looked at me, stared at me. I thought, "Oh, what's he looking at?" And I wasn't. I thought maybe I was going a bit quick because you're still converting your head miles and kilometers and all that nonsense. Anyway, next round I get to, about 10 of the blokes jump out. Move over, pull you over. So I swerve, pull over. Anyway, one window down, guy comes out, says, "I need to step out the vehicle." So I jump out into a puddle, flip flops, feet straight into this freezing cold puddle. So looking down, it's raining. The guy just takes one look at me and says, "What are you doing here?" I said, "Oh, I'm going to Steve Rogers, this and that." He goes, "Have you nicked this?" I said, "No." So I've got all my paper, because I obviously just bought everything over the last 3 days. I've got all my paperwork. I'm showing him everything. He's like, "Oh, no, but whatever. You've definitely nicked this, haven't you?" I'm like, "No, I've not." I said, "No." I said, "Is it not taxed?" So I'm not, he's talking about the caravan now. He's moved on to the caravan. I said, because I've shown him the tax disc and I've had to do all this stuff that we do there. But obviously, like in South Africa, you don't have to cars insured. That's not a forced thing. So did all that nonsense. And he's on about this caravan. I'm like, "What are you on the caravan?" I said, "No, I've just picked it up." I said, "He has the receipt for it. I paid $4,500 for it." And I said, "Listen, it's a dear thing." Because also look at the time, it's old now, but it looked nice then, So he carries on, and he drags me to the back, and I'm walking in a flip-flop t-shirt, shorts, it's raining, I'm freezing, holding myself. He points at the number plate, and he goes, "What are you trying to prove by this?" I said, I'm still looking. I said, "What's the problem?" Because anyway, this exchange happens about 4 times. He goes, "It's not the same." I said, "Should they be?" I didn't know. Number plates in South Africa don't have to be the same. Your trailer in South Africa has a tax disc. So you don't need...
So separate.
So he thought, because the number plates are different, I just hooked someone else's caravan up and started driving away with it. So anyway, he then twigged, or the 5 of them that were trying to arrest me, then twigged that I wasn't talking nonsense. They said, "Oh, we've just done a bike day at Steve's place, rider training thing about a week ago or whatever." I said, "Okay." They said, I said, "Well, I'm only like 2 miles away." I said, "Yeah, we'll show you, don't worry." So there's 3 of them right in front of the van, yeah? But again, I'm still thinking they don't...
Police escort.
Yeah. I'm still thinking these boys don't believe me. You know what I mean? There's no ways to believe, because why is there 3 of them? Anyway, as we get to Steve's shop, if you've ever been there before, it's on the sort of like on the prom, and you turn in, and then you turn like right into the shop, and the car park's there. But obviously I'd never been before, so I'm following them. Next thing, they all turned the sirens and lights on and drove into the car park with all the sirens and lights blazing. And I turned up like in the middle of the car park, blocking everything with this like semi-old Vito and not too bad looking caravan.
How to make an entrance there.
Exactly. And he's got to go. And then Steve wheeled himself out. Comes out, driver. And then I jump out, flip-flops, shorts, t-shirt still on. And he goes, "You're not going to last long, driver, if you keep dressing like that." And that's the first time we laid eyes on each other. So it was quite good. Yeah. And then the rest is history. Parked up around the side and slung a cable through the door, and that was it. And then, then a few weeks later, went testing in Spain, and it was all
Did
great.
you get on okay on the other one?
Yeah, the other one, I think Brendan Rogers did really well then, and we did okay. I came over, I crashed a motocross bike stupidly, trying to get excited for that last bit of training, and broke my collarbone. So it was still a bit sore, and it hadn't gone well. They had it operated on and all that, and obviously moved now, so it was cold. The scar wasn't healing, so some issues. And I remember going to Spain, and then it wasn't great there, and I was at Guadex with I told you a story earlier about the Dunlop thing, but we were at Guadex with Paul Bird's team. He was on Hondas at the time, and Rutter was their rider. And I remember just chasing Rutter around the whole time, and like nearly crashing the bike everywhere, because obviously Rutter's really, really quick, and the bike's good. But luckily Guadix is a bit tight, so like I remember, and I went down on my own but Steve, you can't drive to Spain on your own. You'll just never make it. So
I've got me flip flops, mate.
I'm on it. Will it be warmer? I'm going. And so he sent a friend of his, Dave, down with me. So Dave was helping me sort of turn the spanners and keep. And Dave pulled me on and says, "You know what that is?" I said, "Yeah, it's Mark Ray." He says, "You just can't. Just leave him alone. Stop going out after him all the time and trying to." We only had like 3 sets of tires, and I was like bombing after him, and he was doing. And obviously they were definitely quicker. I'm not trying to say I wasn't the same, but close enough. And John McGuinness was there. I think I was a bit on the same pace as John, or a bit quicker. And now, it was a great test, basically. And then that felt really good, and then came back and then went to Brands Hatch.
You briefly did mention it before, but tell the story about the tyres.
Yeah, also at the test day, when we needed our first set of tyres changed, I said, "Dave, he said, "Oh, going to tyres change." I said, "Oh, they want like, the K-Max, they want like 20 quid. And obviously the rand had already tanked to like 20 to 1. So that's like a lot of rand. I said, "Can't do that, lads. Let me go up." So I went up trying to sweet talk them and said, "Boys, we'll buy," because we're all staying in the same hotel, so we'll buy you some beers. The time beers are like 30p, 30 euro cents or whatever. So I said, "We'll buy you beers." No. And then there was a bit of an altercation because Stuart Bland tried to get involved. And then I said to them, "Listen, I'll just take the tire levers off you, lads, and do it myself in front of you." And I said, "If anyone wants to try and stop me, give it a go." And then it all calmed down, and they basically changed it. But I just felt like we were being picked on a little bit. We were forced to be on it. And I said, I knew the politics behind the brands. I said, "But you're taking the piss, basically." You know what I mean? And I was like already sort of feeling the pinch of the downturn of having to do everything yourself. So my threshold, I had 4 chips more on my shoulder. My threshold had gone to 0. So they got it, the poor lads. And that was
just speaking about the exchange rate from the rand to the thing. I mean, even now it's quite big.
Yeah.
But I've had some good South African friends over the years, and they've kind of briefly told us about it. But like basically it would be the same as if we went to another country and then motorbike racing was like, would you say it's like 4 times more expensive?
4 times expensive, yeah.
Yeah, imagine going, like, for example, the TTs, like if you think is a tyre bill for the TT like 10 grand?
Yeah,
it'd be like the tyre bill for a TT being 40,000 quid.
Yeah, it's mad. The labour rate in South Africa is much, or especially then, the costs have gone up there, but the point was at the time the labour rate was much less, so you would never have paid that for a tyre change. So although we're talking about what seems like a trivial thing, it was probably £1 in South Africa. So for me, they're trying to charge me £20. So like, for 2, it's 20 times, or 10 times the rate. I was like insane. Plus then the exchange rate, which made it worse again. So yeah, it didn't work out. So I was doing like the ratio, thinking, well, you can buy you like 2 beers each, 3 beers. We're still quids in. You know what I mean? We're still alright here, but they weren't having it. And then eventually, I felt we didn't have any gear. So I just said, "Well, can I borrow 2 tire levers?" And then when they said no to that, then I just nearly had it off them.
Was that you like sort of setting your stall out from day one? Like,
yeah, well, it wasn't even trying to make friends or influence people. I was just thought, all I wanted to do is get some tires changed. And I was like,
how to influence people?
I was like, it's just, if they don't, I'm stuck here in the middle of Spain and I can't change a wheel. You know what I mean? Or a tire, I can change a wheel. But we had, and I thought, why didn't we just bring, like in my van now, I've just got my own manual speed breaker, but we didn't have anything. But the next funny story came to the first round of Brands Hatch, which was a great super stock story. So I'd rung Stuart Higgs, I'd rung all the guys and said, "I'm coming over." I said, "Oh, that's nice, blah, blah, blah." And they sort of introduced ourselves. And I got back and, this test had gone quite well. These couple of tests had gone quite well. And obviously Dave was feeding back to Steve. He was like the data recorder telling him what had gone on, including the tyre story. So got to the first round. Then my mechanic that was meant to come clearly wasn't going to turn up. So I'd sort of carboshed someone else's dad who was helping them race, who I knew from South Africa, to help both of us. But that became an issue because obviously his son was riding in the 600 class. But anyway, I had a red pop-up warning. So I got to the round, to the gate, and Jane and Gareth came out. And this came, "Oh, yeah," obviously the accent said, "Oh, you Hudson?" Yeah. And we introduced ourselves, all good at the time. So they're literally standing at the front of the van. So it's the Vito van, the same caravan that we nearly got arrested for. And I looked by and said, "Where's your team?" Because obviously they thought this like, what's going on? I said, no, this is us.
We are the team.
And then I didn't know anything. So then the drive started to go through the paddock, down the bottom, to the middle at the bottom, not the others, not obviously to where the garages are, down there. And then there was loads of people were set up already. And they put me like where no one could see you, because they didn't want that red awning scene at the time, because it was like, now it's okay because they've took it up. But those days it was, unless you had like a 7.5 tonner with a wraparound, they didn't want you even seeing there, so they like put me behind those in the middle, which was fine. It didn't register on my radar at the time, so I put all it down, and I bought myself this massive gas heater that like the thing was steaming because it was obviously cold that time. So the gas heater on, warmth going on, so getting everything changed, and obviously logistics of being where we were started becoming an issue, and it was like wet dry the whole weekend. But the point of the story was that there were 2 qualifying sessions with 42 bikes in each for Superstock. There was 84 bikes qualifying, and a guy that had worked as a tire handler for our factory team at Suzuki had then it was Andy Jamison, he's moved on a lot since then, but he was still early days for him, and he was working for Brent Gladwin. So I was finding him because I had no one to talk to. So I was going to and I'd met some press people, Louise and Frank from Superbike News I'd go up to the press room, but literally 3 people on the whole racetrack you knew. So that was probably the tougher and more like emotional part. But we knew the format and all the rest of it, but I qualified for the race. And Neil McKenzie was coming over and helping me because Neil knew Johnny had met me, and I'd actually met him here before I'd gone up to see Steve. So he's giving me some guidance. And anyway, I went up on dries and it rained, and then I rode back down, changed to wet, and then went up then and was doing really well, and then it dried out. And then, but I still managed to qualify. So I don't know what it was like 20 something on the grid, but in the race, which still I was devastated, but it was still good.
Yeah.
When you think of the 80 odd bikes that were trying to qualify, and Andy's team, the Nvidia team, which was Brent's team at the time, were like the front row and on R1. So like I couldn't even blame the R1. I was trying to blame everything. It's like no trouble. It was the weather and the logistics and just not being up to speed, not knowing. Didn't do any laps at Brands Indy. Everything's like 1 second, but it was like a massive eye opener. Anyway. And Neil came up to me and said, listen, if you just get through turn 1 into Druids, give me a bit of a pep talk. If you can just get up into the points, you can chip away. It's like a 30-lap race or something, 35-lap race. So I remember going balls deep into the first corner, balls deep into second, like pummeling into 5 guys each. The problem is by the time I got to Granville Bend, all 10 of them returned the favour. Because no one gave, it was like it was like a sword. It wasn't even a sword fight, it was a gunfight with machetes, included. It was when I finished the race, I think in the warm-up I'd done quite well. I finished 4th in the warm-up, so that's what spurred me on now. I thought it was going to be like this. That's why
I had this like trophy now.
I had this head of steam. So then that all happened in the race. When I finished the race, it looked like I crashed. The bike was that destroyed left and right. I think I finished like 16th or so. Maybe just got a point, but it wasn't great. It was in the teens, wherever it was. And went back to the alleged caravan and took a couple of hours just sitting there in the dark thinking, and also people had let me down, lots of stuff going on. And rang Johnny, I said, I don't know how like that ever happened, And that was not a low point, but it was a reality check.
Did it ever bother you kind of coming... It's massively out of your sort of pond and into like the only way I can kind of think about it is I remember years ago I once had like trials at a football club, and I remember walking into like the new changing room and like the lads would be like nice shoes mate, and everyone would laugh and that, and you were literally like the odd one out.
Yeah.
You must have felt like that coming 100%. Into BSB. Everyone's growing up together, everyone's mates.
Yeah.
And then to go out on track, obviously get stuck in. Everyone, you must just felt like everyone hated you.
Yeah, absolutely. It was just you basically were a lone, a loner or lone wolf, whatever you want to call it, and you were trying to get going, and you sort of knew, you didn't not doubt yourself, but you just were trying to, you knew the budget situation, you knew where you were, and it was so much. I mean, now it's become more normal, but you imagine the situation coming from a sort of top end and then not dropping down as in series wise, but dropping down as in you've got no support, and then obviously the big problem is if you played football or cricket, those are all bad things because of the team, but you can still take your favorite shoes. You know what I mean? Or now I've got, like, you on motorcycle racing, you've left everything behind, and that is a common thread. And you might enjoy racing a classic bike somewhere, but then you go and race BSB the next weekend or TT or whatever, and you're riding different motorbikes, and you have to adapt. And that was something I was having to learn because that was the biggest wake up call.
I was about to say, was that the toughest race of your life? That like
mentally as well. I mean, if you want to go to a dark, everyone talks about mental health and stuff like that now, but if you imagine after that race how you felt, because also things had gone relatively well till then. You know what I mean? You hadn't had loads of dramas. The testing had gone pretty good. The setup was decent. You're back at the shop. You had everything you wanted. If you wanted an impact gun, you weren't working in a hovel. Everything was pucker. And it just that whole situation, the weather, no team there, and then the race, the way it went, obviously getting beat up basically.
Did you have any more funny run-ins that year with like either people in the paddock or like other riders? Or
yeah, a little. I think the first year, because obviously you had like the southern contingent, so we all sort of like secretly hate each other because of the way you want to beat an Aussie or another Southern Hemisphere.
Like that?
Yeah, it's definitely it sort of carries over from natural sport, because when you go to school in the Southern Hemisphere, definitely South Africa and Australia, you in the school term when there's rugby, it's like, okay, so you've chosen rugby. What's your other subject? What's your other sports subject you're choosing? And then obviously it's so focused that then takes your mind right into the international. So you've never met an Australian before, but you naturally just don't like them in New Zealanders, if that makes sense, because because there's that rivalry, you know what I mean? And it's lesser so with the Northern Hemisphere. But yeah, that was sort of Brendan was winning loads of stuff. So not a run per se with him, but we went and did sort of some work in motor directors, like labourers and building showrooms and stuff. And we had great crack, but then you go to the next race meeting and he'd do really well. So that wasn't really running. I mean, I remember Howie Mainwaring lost. So the second race, we finished. I was on the front row, and then it rained at Donington, and I didn't fall off, but I just rode in a dead straight line slowly because it was wheel spinning down the straights, and I just said, I don't know anyone ride yet. And again, but it qualified quite well, like front row or second row, so that had fixed that sort of issue. Bike was going good, and then I won Thruxton, which was the third round. But me and Howie had quite a big dice then, and Howie, he was a bit inconsistent at the time, still a young lad, but he was really wild. So on the racetrack, he was like sticking elbows into you, and I mean, he was wild his whole way through his career. But then he was like exceptionally wild, especially when you could see
exceptionally wild
the win. You know, we were battling. There was 3 or 4 of us battling for the win, so it was quite insane. But all the races, all those early races, there were two practice sessions, 2 qualifying sessions to get through, and I think only by round 4 or 5 did it actually get to a stage where there was back to one qualifying session. So yeah, it was a very, very deep year, you know, with if you made an error. And in the likes of Alton Park, you know, I went into in Cadwell, those tracks are like very unique. You can't, everyone, you know, it doesn't really make sense because you probably did something there before as a rider, but if you've never rode there and you get there, or even if you do a track day, you think, oh, I know where I'm going, and then you get there and you're with other lads who are, you know, super fast. It's like next level. And when I watched the 600s, there was Carl Crutchlow, Laverty, Sykes, they were all all at the top of their game. Just to remind me a story, back in South Africa, we did a few endurance races at the end of the years, and Tom Sykes came out to be my teammate because he was riding for TAS here. And again, obviously he was only a 600 rider then, but he was quite handy. And I remember turning up to the track after a big, like not a bender the night before, but I came up in a Vito and I brought like 10 people up with me because we drove 450 miles. So we're going up for the day, we'll race and then have a party that night. So I got all my mates and, you know, loads of people. I remember just someone else drove me up. I slept in the back, and we got there on race day, and Tom had been practicing for a few days. And yeah, they really, like, you know, I don't know what the lap times were, but it was really, really fast. Obviously he was a fast lad, and it was like, and then it was like, oh, let's get going. And we between us, we won. And then obviously there was he'd come out and Cal had come out. There was a whole load of lads that came out and rode at different teams. And again, a bit like it was in the old days, but more sort of the track had put it on this time than the federation, so to speak. But yeah, that was another great story.
Was it in your first season at BSB? Was there one rider that pulled up on the grid with you and you thought, I don't want to be anywhere near you?
Brogy was on the start every time, and not because he does anything wrong, just because he's a hard nut, isn't he? You know what I mean? Like, and you just think, you'd always be competitive. He never had a bad race. You know what I mean? So it was like really.
So your main sort of nemesis.
Yeah, all the way through. I mean, later in our racing, we had more even. Because the field, like when we got to Evo in 2010, that we raced each other the whole year. We were the 2 fastest guys, the 2 fastest teams, so we say. And that was a hell of a thing. So it was funny that you think all the way back to France, and we had a big battle then, you know. And and then obviously that first year he was in an NVIDIA team, I think, on R1. So yeah, lots of people that like you started having these bonds, but not for the right reasons. You know what I mean? But great, yeah.
And you obviously mentioned when you first came over that Johnny Towers played a big part in the initial sort of setting up the deal with Steve Rogers. Yeah. And for those people that don't know who Johnny is, he's obviously he's a co-founder of RST and Motor Direct.
Yeah.
And like a good friend of yours. Now, when you first came over, other than putting you in touch, did you go and work for Johnny straight away? And like, what was the connection there?
I just worked. Basically, all I did is I had to prep the bike. So by the third round, before that win at Thruxton, after the win at Thruxton, Steve then went all in, and he, you know, money was no object from a facility point of view. So he bought the lorries, bought everything. We had mechanics, we had people from the shop. He was rotating staff. It was tough because obviously, if you imagine then that everything was really busy. You know, it's pre the sort of financial crash. So everything was really on a high. So if you think about it, to compromise the business was quite a big thing, and he injected a lot of cash into it. So from that point on, Steve sort of took the reins. And then what I did is I used to work either in the shop if I wasn't doing anything, whatever that would be, go and fetch a bike or go help out in any way I could. But obviously, if you think about it, I would still be tasked to do everything on those bikes. So if we came back, I'd do the clean, the prep, get it back ready. So I was full-time running that team, which obviously I rode for, but I was hands-on with that. So it was the one time we didn't have it. But what I did manage to do, I said to you before, we always sort of worked in amongst it, other than having that sort of job, which was part of the deal, shall we say? You know, you couldn't say, I want an extra 30 grand to drive that van, Steve. It wouldn't have gone down well. And to be fair, you know, what he was doing at the time was second to none. But what I did manage to do was a lot of sort of seconds motorcycle clothing. I started and then discovered eBay and started trading in that. And yeah, we had a good year, I think, selling, you know, sort of all riding jackets and stuff that weren't, you know, end of line and all that sort of stuff. So that became an income because I needed something else, because that was a big issue or side point for me. Not that I had something that I needed to fund, but it was something I'd always done in the past. Sure. And then that led on. That was probably the only restriction with being that involved in the racing, that your time was restricted. But it was also, again, you didn't appreciate how lucky you were.
Yeah.
You know, you're sitting there thinking, I never begrudged prepping the bikes. That was always good, but it was just like, I wish that it was, you know, there's something more, you know. And
was that linked with Trick Motor, or was that part of
No, that was before the Trick Motor thing. Eventually that came in. That was just a brand that Motor Direct developed with other goods that they sold, basically. Yeah. So Trick Motor Direct in the end, well, for a long time always did AGV, developed RST, was their in-house brand. Obviously RR, Trick Motor became a brand that they developed. They've got Wolf clothing.
What, motocross, Wolf clothing?
No, the
leathers.
The leather.
The leathers. I was about to say something.
So
Scotland, that.
Yeah, it's two different Wolves. Yeah, but that's another brand that they've always been involved in. So yeah, those, and in Motul, obviously they did Motul. So
yes,
those are their core brands. So yeah, they always did lots of those. But when I first met Johnny, then RST, like no one in BSB rode with RST, and now, you know, you got people in World Championships riding with it. So I just as soon as the leathers fitted me, okay, you know, they were good from the beginning. I never actually had an issue with any suit. Then I just jumped on board, and it wasn't about, because of where I was a big fish in a small pond before, so I came over already as like an RST rider, but not thinking about it. But then when we started doing quite well, and then with the image that Steve allowed the team to portray, was obviously it was really good for all the brands involved, and then Steve obviously lent on Yamaha, and those days, you know, the manufacturers put in, I know they put in money now, but comparatively then it was a huge amount of money.
Now, what, obviously, I know I mentioned it before, and people are familiar that you went over to the Isle of Man TT. Where does that kind of fit into the timeline?
Yeah, so I did 3 years I did a couple of years, 3 years in Super Stock, and then the fourth year I rode Super Sport, and I was talking to the guys at Paul Phillips and the boys that run the TT. They'd come over and see me a few times, and yeah, I was a fan because, again, going back to VHS, we had all the Duke videos from the TT and all the history, and we had the 10 video sets, and we'd watched all that sort of stuff. And my surname is from the Isle of Man, so that at some stage 4 generations ago, they were my family's Manx, so on my dad's side. So the point is,
right.
Yeah, my mom's family's from Cornwall, because obviously if you think about it, most white people in Africa have obviously immigrated there from somewhere else. So over time, you know, if you think of it, settlers came in 1700s or whatever, 1600s. So the point is that it was after that. But yeah, everyone settled there. So that was a strange dynamic that you look back into the history, and I think it was his great grandfather was actually born on the Isle of Man, and then came here, and then got a boat to Africa.
So when you were in South Africa, who was your racing hero then? You know, growing up thinking.
Oh, yeah, easy. Wayne Rainey was my guy. Yeah.
But anyone on the Rhodes element, was that growing up looking at watching it on telly?
Yeah, Rhodes was like sort of. I think it was Joey. Was probably that was later on was when we started getting involved in it. But the videos I watched was all Hailwood. So like if you said, obviously he had already passed, but you know but the thing is, if you looked at that, it was Hailwood, and then you had Agostini battles and all that. That was the VHS we watched, and then we were getting the live results. But that was like, for us, although it was when it got slightly newer, because it covered it from, way back when it first started. But the newer stuff was only a few years out of date, if you see what I mean. So it wasn't massively out of date. And then we were still getting the results, and the roads. We didn't know about the Northwest 200 stuff like that. That wasn't as a problem. But the Isle of Man was it's we were talking before a little bit, but it's unbelievable how big it is. Like you can. I know I've not done it, but what I'm saying is, even as a kid, motorcyclists knew about the Isle of Man in a continent far away. They don't know about MotoGP to that level. You know what I mean? And then they also start to know about those big names from the past. And if you were to say John McGuinness now in a biker's pub in South Africa, 99% of the people would know. Or the breakfast run, the Cobb stop, they would all know him. So, it doesn't get fed live. It's not a live show. Do you know what I'm trying to say? It's just it's trickled down through TV networks.
Obviously, it's going live this year. It'll be interesting to see how that sort of transcends internationally.
Yeah, I think that'll be a big step, because the problem you've got is, going off topic on motorbikes, the problem with TV packages in foreign countries is, unless it's a core sport, that they put on the back burner. So if you think about it, that those days especially, I mean, it's changed a little bit now with stream, but pre-streaming, if you think about it, you're paying subscription like a version of Sky.
Yeah.
But if they only catering to their market, so if your market for motorcycles is smaller, that's what they're going to cater for. We still got 500cc GP, that was still live, but like in the 80s, early 90s, we would get our national series would be live. Do you know what I mean? That and then that stopped happening in the early 2000s. Then we'd have a package that was shown later. Do you see what I mean? So everything evolved onward. So it's how it's covered. If it's covered and obviously TT is a great show. You know what I mean? It's the
spectacle race doesn't actually need selling as a package. It sort of sells itself.
It doesn't need the fireworks from Kota and all that sort of stuff. It literally it's got all the glamour anyway. And if you watch it, you're blown away. And if you're an average motorcyclist, it connects with you straight away, because you've all ridden down a road a little bit too fast.
The TV coverage will never replace being roadside, but hopefully it'll bring.
Are you on the committee now for the TT or something? You're selling this beautifully, Chrissy. I'm a big fan of your work.
Hopefully it'll bring in a new.
Absolutely.
Do you know how powerful TV is? Do you know the old Top Gear series where they used to go on they would go on trips to the just middle of nowhere. Yeah. They would be driving through there, and people would come out of mud huts with no electricity or whatever. Jeremy Clarkson, and they would be going mad for Jeremy Clarkson.
That's how it would be for McGuinness or the top TT guys. There's been a little bit
bloke out of a motor going McGuinness.
Honestly, I've always had a concept that if we did a world like those transatlantic things, if you got the likes of John and all those guys to track like Kyle Army, one, you'd get loads of crowd. Obviously now it's much easier to have a streaming service, and if you had that sort of stock battle, you know what I mean, with the guys that are hitters from all different echelons, and if the money was right, it pays everyone's wages, and it would be a massive spectacle, and it would be a leveler as well.
The transatlantic Freetech race. Come on,
we'll get onto that later on. That's already happened. But it happened in a low key scenario.
Hold on, they were trying to do the World TT Series. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
They were actually going to try and do Southern Hemisphere.
What you said about TV to reality. So I had all that perspective, had all those conversations at racetracks. 2007, I think it was the centenary year. I don't know if it was Johnny had gone over or whatever to have a look. Anyway, I flew over. Someone picked me up from the airport, drove me down to a house. I won't give away where it is quite yet. Anyway, walked to this house. Obviously, the Isle of Man houses are unique in their own way, if you know what I mean. So walked through. Barbecue was going, pristine hedge, all the rest of it. There was a few little holes in the hedge I didn't quite understand at the time. Anyway, they said, it's starting, a couple of minutes. Literally standing in this garden with the water feature going and all the rest of it. And everyone ran to the hedge, stuck their heads through the holes that they'd done. And they said, come over, look, come on. I stuck my head through. I just heard this little howl in the distance. And I was looking, and there was a downhill coming towards me, then a little dip here, and then the road was here. And I was like looking left, looking right. Anyway, not very long, obviously. This motorbike goes through the bottom of Bray Hill, hits bottoms out, goes, and then all that noise, and the whole hedge, it scratched the shit out of my face, because the hedge moved that much. I wasn't prepared. I was still too hard against the hedge, and he flew past, and I think it was John at the time, and that just, literally, it happened so quickly that I stepped back. The bike was already gone, because I stepped back in fear, from seeing that. It was just blew my mind. I was like, we standing here. like in this hedge. I'm telling people, this hedge will never protect you. This is not going to help you at all. Like this hole in this hedge is not the future, lads. When it was brilliant, and then obviously the next blokes all just kept on coming, and then eventually it became normal after a couple of beers in 2 days.
That's the shock that it shocked you so much.
Absolutely.
Coming from like a street racing background where you don't get any more raw than that.
But when you're doing it, it's slightly different to. But because I'd watched it, and you don't, we've been buzzing around racetracks forever at high speed, and you think, oh, it's normal, and then that happened. Also, it was unexpected. No one prepped me. They didn't say, listen, we're at a barbecue where in about 2 minutes' time, a motorbike's going to come past at 170 miles an hour. So, but it was such a real experience.
Was it an instant thing of like when you seen it, where you're like, I've got to do this at some point?
Well, it was in the initial respect for it was just, it was mind blowing. It literally was uncomprehendable. The whole I'd literally seen nothing of the island at that stage. So, and then the rest of I think it was there for like a week. The rest of the week, you saw the vibe, the everything else that goes on, other than the racing, which is part of the appeal. If you from the live aspect, that's why I think what you said about the TV and the live, like I see a lot of South Africans when I was doing it. A lot of South Africans were traveling over and they were saying it was a once in a lifetime. I know a few couples, at least 4 families that have gone every year. That obviously, other than COVID, that has been there since they went the first year, because they won't go on any other holidays anywhere else. They'll just go to the TT. So, yeah, it's pretty cool. So, that whole experience of those days being there, and then I was down at Peel when they had the Mad Sunday down there, and all that sort of stuff. That just completely sucked me in. And then it was on the cards to be done. It was just when the timing and the bike and that was right.
And what was the time gap between the hedge to actually going, I'm getting on the ferry with my bike, I'm going to have a go?
I think we did it, I can't remember what happened. I was doing super sport at the time, so it didn't make sense. I was like, I need to get back into 2000s. And in 2010, we went back and did it. I did it in my own team. And because I was riding Superbike BSB in the Evo class at the time. So my only reservation was I wanted to be on 1,000 to go and race 1,000 there. That was my logic. But how much purpose that served, I don't know. But
did you go over on the split bike?
No, initially. So initially, that year, 2010, I started with Malcolm Ashley racing a Kawasaki, which was actually probably the best bike, strangely, on the grid. And then he wasn't getting any support, and the bike was eating gearboxes, and there was just no money. And that sort of normal, sort of disjointed the team slightly. Mm-hmm. And then the Split Lass boys came along and wanted a rider, so I jumped ship to them. And obviously that was a lucrative scenario. So that was an easy transition, although the Aprilia wasn't nearly as good as the Kawasaki. And everyone didn't really rate that Kawasaki. That Kawasaki as a Evo bike with the Motec on was probably the best. It was better than the BM. It was better than everything else. It could do a better lap time. And he went backwards on that. But I'd signed for the TT like the year before, and I literally went and bought my TT bike off the reviews. Like I went back to old school and I went and bought a BMW because it was the fastest bike in 2010. I thought, well, if I'm going to that racetrack, I just need the fastest bike. Yeah, I need power. Should have bought a Honda, without being, because they're more for a new ride at the time. That was probably the most malleable bike.
Yeah.
But obviously you didn't know the BMW was by far the fastest motor. It was 20 horsepower more than everything else. So, but it was a bit of a handful around there.
Yeah.
So your first time on the TT was on
my own bike. So I took a Kawasaki ZX6R in Super Sport, but it was semi-standard. And then I took I bought my own brand new BMW to go out and
always ask the same question. First year at the TT, what was your fastest lap?
Oh, I think it was 120 something. I was second fastest newcomer to David Johnson that year. So, and David was on a Honda.
The Southern Hemisphere rider as well. I bet that was great.
All over the whole career. It's been, but the thing is, as soon as you mark them, then you find them everywhere, don't you? You know what I mean? They're all over the show. But DJ's a good lad. So yeah,
that's even worse. I bet. You know what I mean? I bet you just wish he was an arsehole.
I know. Wish he was an idiot. He's been such a nice guy.
And at this point, you'd already won the Superstock Championship, haven't you? Which kind of glossed over that.
No, so I knew what.
Massive highlight of his career.
Just glossed over. I didn't get screwed over. We screwed ourselves over. One of the years in Superstock, I think it was the second year, I was winning the championship on the R1 raceways, and everything was, because now we were set and going. And Rob Mack fired James Hayden. So he rung Steve and said, listen, I want to get Hudson on the bike, blah, blah, blah. So obviously Steve sort of not sold it to me, but told me what was happening. And at the time there was no resistance. But also, if you think back, like thinking about what was happening, if you had a manager, you wouldn't have made the step, because there was lots of stuff in the background that you could never know, even Steve didn't know about, that was obviously going on. There was the tyre war, on Pirellis, because it was helping their budget. So lots of stuff that you said, well, let's go and test the bike or whatever. And then we turned up at Alton. I rode the stock and the superbike, both classes the same day. And I think I qualified on a pole in the stock, and then I think 12th or 15th. We did top 15 but between 12th and 15th on the superbike. I was like Scott Smart and me were racing, and Rob wasn't very happy. He said, "Oh, the stock bike's holding you back on the superbike." But the superbike that he had, or that R1 still had electronics, but nothing worked. So it was like a nightmare to ride around it, because it was highly tuned and didn't work. And no wonder Tommy Hill was the other rider. Tommy was doing okay. Tommy was like top 10. Every now and again, he go really well, but on average, he was like 8th to 12th, you know what I mean, as a fair assessment. But you had like Lavia, Haslam on the Ducatis, and some good bikes. So if you knew all that, you might have, but you just thought, oh, it's a factory Yamaha, and this is my opportunity, and sort of ran at it. But
so you would have won the Superstock Championship that year.
We would have won it. So yeah, we and then after that race, we didn't win that Superstock race because it rained and they stopped the race, and then we went out on wets or whatever tires and everything, and the race didn't go to plan, but we still did okay. But it was quickest the whole weekend on that. We're doing really well. And then anyway, so Rob stopped me riding it, so didn't ride Superstock for 3 rounds, and then he sacked me at a Croft before I got to Croft test. Just told Steve, but actually we probably would have made a step. We never would have got to where probably Rob wanted to be, but we were about to make a decent step with the bike.
Was that sacked on performance?
Yeah, well, he just wanted instant results. So I think we had 3 rounds, and I think we went to Mondello, and I did really badly at Mondello. I underperformed at Mondello. It was shocking. Yeah. I think I crashed into Zanotto, or Zanotto crashed into me, and there's a clip of me shouting at him. But it was more that the whole thing just wasn't working. But it was that bike basically going to bore you about tires now. It was so front endy that you needed a really good front tire, or a hard front tire, and the Pirelli was the opposite of that. So we tried it secretly at Dunlop, and you were never going to win, but you could go a lot faster. So Pirelli, I think, made a tire that was very similar to the Dunlop, because it was beautiful, because they would literally make you whatever you wanted. They just had no idea what to make.
Yeah.
If you see what I mean. So that was the problem. So it was going to take more time than that. So it cost me that championship. So I think I finished second to Glenn, but with three rounds missed.
And then what was the year that you did win the
13? I went 2013. So after the
Superbike thing, had you already won the Evo class?
Yeah, I came second in stock that year when I lost. We lost those rounds. Yeah, I came second, and so the next year we then went to Super Sport, and I finished second to Glenn in Super Sport on the Yamaha versus the Triumph battle. But again, it was went down to the last race, but there was. Like, it was mathematically, I think it was mathematically possible, but it was nearly a race. But we'd had an engine blow up in Donington. We were doing really well, which would have made the last race more of a fight. Yeah. So it's one of those things. But second was really good. And then I left Raceways then, which was obviously in hindsight definitely a mistake, if that makes sense, because I wanted to have direct results, and a lot of that stuff had happened, and also chasing a bit of money, because there was still money floating around the paddock at the time. So I was drawn away, and then we went, and I rode Seats and Tuning had a really good bike with good sponsors.
They were Yamaha based as well.
They were Yamaha, and I tested their bike. The only problem was, in the year before, I finished 4th at World Supersport on the Raceways bike at Donington, and we beat Brock Parts, and all those guys it was a dry race, but wet qualifying and everything. And the race was dry, and it was like Johnny Ray, I think, won it. Pitt was second, the Scorse, and then me. It was 4th or 5th. Yeah, so it was a decent field. And the quick shifter stopped working on the second lap, so I had like such arm pump because I haven't changed gear like for 5 years, 10, 6 years, and I was having to change gear in the biggest race of your life. So just one of those things, but still in range of them. But it was a great race. But we were still riding a kitted Yamaha. That was my frustration with Raceways, was that we had everything in the parts catalogue, but it was all the kit stuff. And if you looked at like Glenn's bike, you had all the Motec stuff. So it might have been worse, but the point is that the lights looked more fancy. So you wanted that. You know what I mean? And again, you look back, you just think you should have just kept your cool. But Yamaha then, in the year I left, Yamaha then gave Steve full access. Basically, he went over budget. And he got a Cal Crutchlow bike, basically.
Yeah. And so you went to Seat and Tuning on this Super Sport bike.
On Super Sport, yeah. That was a poor year. I jumped from them to Kawasaki. I don't know if I won a race that year. I had a few podiums, but nothing good. A few pole positions, but it was a poor year. I can't remember if definitely a few crashes as well. And then the year, what was that? That was 9. So then 10 was Evo. So that was a good year. So basically, Stuart Higgs run all the sort of mediocre boys up, shall we say, and said, listen, we're doing this Evo class, probably going to become Superbike. Spoke to some of the teams, obviously, like Jenton, MAR, Gary Johnson was on a Suzuki. There was a few sort of teams that had been in Superbike before, but they obviously weren't the top boys. And the prize money was 1,500 quid a race, 2 races a day. So $3,000. I was back to the $3,000 scenario 10 days later.
You're like, I'm back.
I was like, we're having a bit of this, lads.
That's it. I've got a mortgage to pay for. Let's crack on.
We're having a bit, and then I think me and again back to Brogan. Me and Brogy like won almost every one. And there were a few
South
other
African and a Scouse lad racing for money.
Chris
Burns, there we are.
Chris Burns was in it then.
Yeah, Chris was. So the Aprilia team started with Chris and Joe. Yeah, Chris and Joe. Yeah,
Joe rode a bike off down Paddock Hill. I remember that.
Yeah. Well, we turned up to. I got into rider management and then immediately out of it because we'd gone to the first round, and because we had, well, not me, but the team had the Arctic and everything. We bought 2 ZX6s to rent out to youngsters to ride. So that all happened anyway. One of them qualified, one didn't, because they were back to those big qualifying grid scenarios. And the dads are all scrapping. I'm trying to get going. I hadn't ridden this Kawasaki until we got to brands, to BSB. No testing, no nothing. So I'm getting quicker and quicker. Then next thing I see Joe bouncing a bike down Paddock Hill. Made me feel sorry for him, but a bit better for myself. At least I haven't done that today, because it was shocking at the time. Everything just felt so alien. And I had the dads were scrapping up with the super stock kids, and I was just like, this isn't gonna happen. And luckily for me, what saved me is I had some friends who worked in security, really big burly South Africans that had come to watch me just as mates. And I said, could you just go and sort them out? Anyway, they had to pay some money to the organisers and to Tybals. They just literally picked them up and just carried them to wherever they needed to swipe their cards, paid, and then just sent them on their way. So that was done. So we got out of that.
Do they live locally? I'm just wondering what's me back here. You know, do they still live here? You know,
they were okay. The problem is, it's just if your expectations that you're going to go and win Super Stock 600 is not possible. And the bikes were, they were stock bikes, so they were decent. And we were living the dream because we're all in the pit lane. And I was still thinking back to my first year when my little red tent down the middle. I'm like, lads, you don't know how lucky you are. And so my fuse was about that short. For them, I had like no interest.
Yeah,
and I was struggling.
And from the 2000, so the Evo class, for people that aren't aware, it was so before BSB got rid of open electronics and went to the standard, so everyone runs the same Motec system. They kind of trialed it with an Evo class, so it was a class within a class, which yourself and like the people you've just mentioned, and then those rules were then expanded to the whole championship, which is what we've got now.
Yeah.
Did you do a few years in Evo class?
We did that year, and basically the next year the Aprilia team changed to Superbike, but arrived with a standard bike, if that makes sense. So we tried to run an Aprilia the next year, and we moved to Superbike, but it never
split that.
The Superbike never happened.
But Derek Redmond was very involved with that.
Yeah, Derek Redmond was involved. There was lots of high profile people around that team. Yeah. So it was good. It's like a weird sort of link, when your sort of private life and your sort of job and stuff all interlink. So like say Derek Redmond would always be at BSB, and through Zoe Byrne I got to like sort of meet him and sort of be friends, and he like followed us on Twitter and stuff. And I was at the time I was only about probably about 14 or whatever, and then I was at school, and Derek Redmond always gets used in assemblies, for like against adversity, like keep going and all of that determination. What he did in the Olympics. And
he always comes up in like loads and loads of assemblies. And I remember like watching an assembly on Derek Redmond being like, oh yeah, I'm like sort of friends with him. Like he follows us on Twitter, and people are like, yeah, of course he does. And you're like, no, he does. Like, I was speaking to him at the weekend, like not one of my mates, but like you sort of know.
And he's a sound lad. He's like you wouldn't.
Oh, he's brilliant.
He's a brilliant guy.
He was great.
I bet he goes, oh, there's that stalker Chrissy Rouse again. You know what I mean? I keep on following him.
Such a petrol head, didn't he? So, those days he was racing in the Hot Tracks Endurance as well. So we used to do some races with them. I think he had his own team, from what I remember. But we used to go and do races, and got on. I mean, I know he did the pit boarding for me at like Alton one of the times, and when we were.
It's funny that do you know that that Olympics was like the best thing that's ever happened to him.
Yeah, that injury. Even if he won, it wouldn't have been as good. That
injury, because even to this day, like. He's like so famous, and off the back of that, being able to do so many, he's being able to use that show of determination, public determination, and like it's a great story. Everyone can kind of relate to it, and then you can expand that out into like business and life in general.
Absolutely.
And then sort of, and it's been an amazing thing. But
from knowing him, he definitely, what happened on that day in the bits I've seen when he's had lesser adversity in the motorsport world, it has come to the forefront. So it's quite nice to have seen it again, if you know what I mean, firsthand, and obviously knowing that legendary clip and what happened then, and all that, and obviously seen afterwards, it was me, and also to be able to just, like you say, just be able to interact with a legend,
Yeah, really cool. So I'm just kind of going through your timeline. So you went to the Evo thing, and then straight back to Superstock after that.
No, Superbike. So split that into Superbike in 2011.
Yeah,
and that didn't, basically they were promised a Max Biaggi 1-year-old bike that. We got to the first round and the bike still had headlights on it, so I knew it was game over. So just one of those under-delivering. They got let down essentially, but I'm sure in the background there was money that should have changed hands and then didn't.
Right.
But they were definitely, from the talk is that they are quite good at supporting racing. That's obviously, you can see that now MotoGP. They were supporting the superbikes a lot then, so they had a lot of kits, but. It was just, I'm sure the cost to run them was, what we knew was massive. And the way those bikes were, because they were the proper superbikes, they had like a gear-driven cam. So you had to have a major conversion. You couldn't just borrow some cams or something at the back door. You needed a full engine. So it actually was even more difficult than going, like trying to build a hybrid or something like that. It wasn't possible. So that was that year. And then we finished that year up. And then in 2012, I was back to saying, the Evo thing. Well, I think Evo still went in 12, but we went in that. And obviously by 13, it then went to Superbike as it is now. 12, it went to Superbike. 12 or 13 went to Superbike now. But in 12, I went and I thought, well, the only way I'm going to make money, the way, or enjoy racing, afford to race, and hopefully make some money out of it by winning, because, either being second, or I'd won lots of races, but finished second lots of championships for various reasons, was to run our own team. So I got hold of a friend of mine who had done quite well for himself up in Scotland, Ionic Balance, and I said to him, this is my plan, and this is how it'll work, but we need some budget to make it happen. And he was in a position to be able to do that. He wanted to do that to push his brand. So that came quite easily. We had some old sponsors that came on board, and we had our own team, and it was okay. It was I probably underestimated, because I thought I'd been here, I'd done it before, I'll do it again, and had a bit of an awakening. And then I crashed at Thruxton in turn 2 and broke my back. So I broke my back. But then by this stage, I had a day job working in finance, because I'd studied finance in school. So I changed over. So when I eventually got a chance to get a real job, I'd moved into finance. I was working for Lloyd's Bank. And I remember going into...
That is such a grown-up thing for a motorcycle racer.
I know, it changed completely. But it was just
You could have had me at gunpoint. I would never, ever have guessed that. Yeah. I'm impressed. Carry on. Sorry.
So I broke my back then, but wasn't disabled, luckily. But... they didn't scan me, because they didn't have that scanner at BSB then, and I was trying to pretend I was brave. And remember, couldn't really drive home because of what was going on. Got to the office on Monday, tried to go in, and sat in the office, and I couldn't stand up. Like my legs were particularly weak, and then realized, obviously, then went for some X-rays and realized there was a bit of swelling going on. That wasn't great, but it was stable. So that wrecked my year. And then basically what happened was that same sponsor said, "Listen, you're knackered." So when you think you recovered, I went and rode for Brent on his Aprilia in Superstock, the WD-40 team, and that was a good place to be. It was quite cool, but we just lacked pace for lots of reasons. Obviously, I wasn't in a great shape. And then we rolled the Kawasaki out at the last round, the same one that from the beginning at the last round of BSB, and I finished 4th at I think it was the Brands Long, on our own little team with Tony Homer had a rig in that, and we just said, listen, can we piece something together, because we want to. I'd been riding, and it was quite funny. I'd be at BSB, been told by a team that you're shit and you don't know what you're doing, but I'd been there like a week before and been not lap record pace, but been really quick on my Kawasaki, and been like, yeah, but I know that I'm not shit, because two days ago I was on that bike doing this lap time, But it wasn't, but that never came in conversation. But luckily I knew.
Yeah.
And we went through, and the next year we said, well, we'll try and do it a bit better than 12 and don't crash. And and 13 went sort of to plan. But we were on because obviously everything had degraded really from all those sponsors were now in year 2, and the whole world had changed. We had the recession, all that stuff. So all those glory days I spoke about before, those were definitely gone, completely back to not how we are now, but I think worse than it is now. And this is God's honest truth. The whole year we raced, we never had a spare front wheel. Never had a spare front wheel. We had 2 spare rear wheels. We had one spare rear wheel and 1 front wheel on the bike. That was it. We won the championship with no spare front wheel. So that's
and 2 tyre levers that you nicked.
Yeah, well, the tyre levers from Dunlop.
Was this the trick motor?
Yeah, BMW. So we had budget to run, but it was like if you crashed and wrote the bike off, then you would have potentially an issue. I think I crashed at Silverstone in the Silverstone 200. We did that like MotoGP warm up.
Yeah.
But luckily it was at Cops at the end of the straight, but the bike didn't bounce. But I remember borrowing some fairings from one of the teams, and they were green, and we didn't want to paint them, so we wrapped them. And I said this, and they were really heavy, so I ordered some, but they weren't ready in time, and we dragged our heels ordering them. Anyway, we got to the next race, which was at Silverstone, PSB round, and we just wrapped them on. I said to them, listen, if we damage them, we'll give you the new ones that are on order. And the guys didn't really like it, had some sort of attitude issue. I think we were trying to take it off the bike, and that was the problem we had. I said, listen, we don't, it's like an hour to the race. If we damage them, you don't need them. They didn't need them. It was just being a bit funny. Could understand it because they sort of helped, I think they helped Tony out. But anyway, I intervened. They were having an argument. I intervened, and we all got into a bit of a scrap at Silverstone. So that was about 10 minutes before qualifying. We were like thumping each other, put our helmets on, then went and qualified. I think it was on pole at Silverstone with their fairings on. And I said, if you want the fairings, you have to kill me. So that's what's going to happen, lads. It's that simple. And I said, it hasn't worked out so well. So we were bloody noses. It was a proper scrap. All their mechanics, ours. My dad was involved. I was involved. It was literally, it was brilliant. Gareth come down. He said, has it been something? No, I said, no, because you get thrown off when you get thrown out the track. So, but we didn't actually go to scrap. It all happened in the garages. So, it was really tight on budget. So the next fairings arrived. We painted them, did give them their fairings back, didn't nick them. If anyone,
just to clarify,
we could have had them back in 10 minutes. I just couldn't have them back that minute. That was the only problem. It was the timing.
I tell you what, though, I can't wait for this podcast to go out. The amount of people braying each other in the garage to get hyped up for pole position and qualify.
Honestly, I was my parents my dad had realised that they said that when you if you get something that irritates you before a race, you definitely go to a new level. So I don't know if they used to try and get that to happen, but
Hudson Kennaugh's psychological performance coach in here. That's it.
Getting told.
So
get revved.
That year was it Adam Jenkinson? You mean?
Yeah, Jenko was up there.
Was Buchan in it that year?
No, Buchan was the next year he came in. But we had Halloran might have been there that year.
Yeah,
the Hondas were there.
Another Southern Hemisphere. I'm just lacking them off.
Factory Hondas. Well, the other thing that happened was so that was one scrap. We didn't have any other scraps, and then we found some money halfway through the year before Alton to have the bike rebuilt. Because it was 2 years old now. So we had all this done, and Ray Stringer did it. Got it back. Got to Alton. Put the engine in before. Didn't die or anything. Just went straight to the track. Did 4 laps. It was like flying. Like Ray's a really, really, really good bike builder, and the thing was like. I was just like, this is going to be so much better than it was before. And we were still at 1 races. Anyway, on the 5th lap, it blew up. So we didn't know why at the time. But basically what happened is a little nut on the oil pump had been left not tight enough, and the oil pump fell off, so it destroyed the engine. So obviously it was just filings everywhere. So seeing there was that when you weren't allowed to spare, we didn't have a spare bike, we didn't have a spare front wheel. But the point was you weren't allowed a spare bike. So Johnny Towers had a Track Day ZX10. In his garage, just fiberglassed up. But the problem was you couldn't just go and borrow a bike because you weren't allowed. You had to swap an engine. Mm-hmm. So then we left Alton. Well, my dad left Alton. He got about 10 miles down the road, had a blowout on the front left, changed the tyre, then had a blowout on the front right because the van's tyres were like 10 years old. It was like a racing van. It didn't do any mileage. So the tyres had got to an age. So now we've got a blown engine and a van stuck on the side of the road with a blown tyre. So eventually gets the tyre changed. We get a tyre guy out, gets to Johnny's, picks it up, brings it back. We had to take the engine out of his bike, put it into our bike, swap the engines from the 2 motorbikes across, right?
Is this a ZX10 to a BMW?
No, 2 ZX10s. I was on a ZX10 that year, so Johnny had a ZX10. So we took his engine out, put it on my bike. My engine was toast. Swapped him over because you couldn't change the whole bike. You had to, because the frame wasn't smashed, so you couldn't change the frame. And if the frame was smashed, you had to keep the engine. You had to do a frame swap, which makes sense if you crash, but doesn't make sense in this example. But anyway, point was, we did all that. And his thing was like terrible. It was like worse than my one before. Just subtle differences. When you're talking a swing of 6 or 7 horsepower. Victor Cox was racing then as well. He was quite a good guy on the covers. Anyway, the race started and I think we finished 4th. I finished 4th in the race. And they came down and they got a little piece of paper in Parfuma and said, we're going to strip your bike. But they knew, the scrutineers knew that we changed the engine.
Yeah.
They know it's not my engine that we started with. So I said, it's not my engine, guys. I've borrowed this engine. He's got a track day on Wednesday. No, we're stripping. So when I saw Stuart, had a conversation with them. Anyway, they all had a bit of an altercation later, which they can tell you that story their own time, but it cost them.
Who's that, sorry?
The rest, Johnny and Stuart and all of them had their own chat, but I wouldn't have warned them. I said, listen, guys, it's not my engine. I've literally borrowed this engine from someone else. It just happens to be this chap who we all know, and it's legit. So you strip me next weekend, or next race when it's my engine, but I don't really want to give his engine back in a box, if you see what I mean, or try and get it rebuilt. So anyway, they stripped us, they stripped the Honda, whatever. So we pulled it all apart, the crankcase, cranks, everything, measured the lot. So pulled apart, the engine was like, it was destroyed, it was worn out. It was like the valves were hanging off it, everything. So in the end, I tried to sell it to him like I did him a favor. He still wasn't happy with me. He's pissed off because he missed his track day. He didn't want his bike stripped. Gave him, literally, can you imagine going back to his house? There's your frame. There's your engine, mate.
You're welcome.
Thank you. And thank you very much. Oh, he has a case of beer. Cheers for that. So you weren't very happy. So although I tried to sell the dream, that actually saved him a bit of time. So then while we were there, I tried to buy the factory Hondas. I said, lads, you stripped your Honda. They're only 15 grand in the thing. I'll write you a check. Buy that Honda off you now. They didn't want to sell their Hondas. Don't know why. They just didn't want to sell this. Those standard Hondas, they wouldn't sell them to us. It was because they were like quite fast at the time, So there's a bit of banter going on. And then Jenko's mechanic.
Were you saying that in like tongue in cheek?
No, I was serious. I've got my checkbook. I said, there you go. I said, you can cash it. I said, I'll do a transfer now. I'll buy the bike with you. They're about 15 back in those days, not like now.
Yeah.
They're 35. Cheap then.
Yeah.
And I said, don't get a racing discount as well, because you guys did. Anyway, they wouldn't do it. But while we're having that, Jenko's mechanic, Alex is the name. I wasn't there. I'd like left the situation there. He started getting on a Tony Homer. Because he said, I don't like your attitude, because we'd been on at the Honda lads, but not aggressively, in a nice, generally trying to buy the bike, just saying, because they were abnormally fast.
They're just thinking you're all being sarky in that.
You didn't, well, Jenko and us we were probably more in the hunt, so he probably had to go. Anyway, they nearly had a scrap when they were then, right? I wasn't involved in that. And then, but me and Adam, we not mates, but we racing mates, if you know what I mean.
Wow.
Never had a Adam's a sound lad, and we never had a thing, but it was funny how the team Mackies were like arm wrestling each other in the in the bay, having a pop with each other. But that was good.
Did that championship go down to the wire?
Yeah, the last round, I think I had to finish top 10, and he could win it, and I would win the championship. So it was the first time all my other ones I'd got to, and I was always on the back foot for one reason or another.
Yeah,
but that was the one I got to, and I could manage it. So it rained at Brands. Bit of an iffy race. I think I finished 5th or 6th, and then we won the race. But then again, a bit of a sour. They have to strip the bikes when you win. I don't know if they probably stripped yours.
Yeah.
And then they said they want to strip the bike. I said, yeah, that's fine. I said, but is there any like compensation? They said, no, there's nothing. I said, but that's like 450 quid for me to put it back together. So anyway, I booked a restaurant here for friends and family. Obviously, we had Brands. So I stripped the bike. Obviously, it was legal. And then we had a bit of a thing at the track, quickly packed it and left. I think my dad and Tony stayed there to carry on. And then we all headed up here with the missus and all loads of friends. And we came up here. So I got a phone call saying, we're doing the start line photographs. I said, yeah, you see the bike that's in the last garage that you got in the box? Put that on the grid and take a picture of that, because it just cost me 450 quid. So the next year, the roads and the rules, if you win, you have to do it. Because I said, I'm 10 beers in and 2 steaks in front of me. I'm done. I don't care. But in hindsight, you wish you maybe took the picture, because there's an element of that. But it was all, I don't know, they have to strip the bike. But the point is that you won a championship and then go down, best part of at best 500 quid. You know what I mean? And your bike's literally in a box. There was no prize money for winning the championship. That was basically the bugbear of the issue. And then you're stripping the bike. I know if it was someone who beat me, I'd want the bike stripped to get checked. So that's not my issue.
Yeah,
my issue is that it's just like a negative.
Yeah.
You win and then you pay a 500 quid bill.
Mm-hmm.
The bill at the restaurant was only 200 quid.
Yeah, you're working. You can tell you're in finance.
I've got 700 quid down in the space of 4 hours winning a championship. There's no ways that's a winning combination.
And then after
people taking notes of this,
after winning that championship, did you then stay in Superstock for a few years, or what was it?
Yeah, basically all I did then is, again, I was lucky that year, because we had such a lean year with the way we ran it, that there was a bit of prize money. There is in the normal races, there was a bit of payback on tires. So we weren't making a fortune, but I had my day job, and I wasn't costing me to race, and I was winning lots of and podium lots of races. So you were still getting the 1,200 quids, 1,500 quids. So it was decent. It was a financially decent year. And it's not all about the money. You race because, like we said before, you enjoy it and you get the kick. But I always said to anyone who was in a contract negotiation, which is why some of the teams didn't like the way it went, I said, you can't win the race on Sunday and have your house repossessed on Monday. That just can't be the way it is. So I said, if you want me to pay 60 grand for a ride, that's fine. But if I win the championship, I want 120 grand. Because that's my ratio. If I don't win or if we don't hit these targets, because you're telling me I need to pay X amount of money or someone needs to, or we need loads of new tires because we need this performance element. But obviously if you think about it, that's why I never ended up riding for those teams that were sort of middle rung that needed budget, because we could provide budget. There was people, even myself, we could put something in. But my expectation was that if you look back at my career, I probably had 1.5 years where I didn't deliver. The rest of the time, I was always there or thereabouts. So even after the 2013, so the point was that there's no payback here, from you guys. So that was my issue, and that's why sometimes the bad rep. Obviously, there's been a few altercations with the ones I've mentioned now, but the point is that's why they didn't like that, And then equally, as time went on, I got myself in a better place. As a team, 14 we rode for BMW. Mm-hmm. We got full support from them. We got bikes. We got loads of stuff. And Kawasaki, when in negotiation with them, it was quite interesting. That I said to them, "Well, we've won the championship. What do we get for next year? Well, we might give you a discount. Might do this. Might do that." BMW were offering motorbikes, spares package, everything.
Everything, yeah.
Yeah, and they said, "Well, everyone's on a Kawasaki because by the end of 13, 90, other than the 2 Hondas which they wouldn't sell, were on Kawasaki's." Mm-hmm. So they said, well, everyone's on Kawasaki's. I said, well, I'll go into BMW. And it was tougher. There was challenges with that because of the infrastructure, but it was still a good bike. If I'd been a bit better, then that bike could have won, or won more. It did all right. But yeah, and then Danny came through, and then the younger guys started putting you under pressure. And, there's lots of good riders. We have to believe you're the best when you go into a race, otherwise you beat. Yeah. But you also have to think, how do you deliver that? And then the Isle of Man TT, I think it was 15. I crashed there and I broke my back again at Braddon Bridge, and that's a quite interesting story because I was on the twin sponsored by Sherlaw's Kawasaki, mm-hmm. and they were a really good bike, and I think I saw P11 on the board onto that last lap, and I had the bike in the garage the whole year and sort of gone through it, rode it a few times, but those twins, they sort of drop off, and it was dropping off. You could feel the engine was getting a bit softer, so I thought I want to be top 10 or maybe more, but I can only make it up on the brakes and corners and so forth. So anyway, by the time I got to Braddon, I went in there and I braked super late, but I think I had a manhole cover, tucked the front in a straight line. So literally didn't slow down and then slid into the bridge. So, and then was ticketed. But,
ticketed. Yeah, that is the most polite way of
I was in a bad way.
There you go. Jesus.
And then I sort of remember bits of it, but the interesting, the moral bit of the story is that I was lying in hospital in Isle of Man on the same day, and I think worse stuff. Yeah, stuff happened in the senior that was probably worse, but they'd scanned me and done all that stuff, and they said it's stable. But I'd had all this story before when in 12, and I said okay, cool. And they said, well, when you can walk, you can crack on, you can go out. So anyway, my mom started. She had early Alzheimer's then, but she was still functional. But the point is, she'd gone across to the police station and said, oh, my son's crashed in the race. So the police drove her to the hospital. So she's the only one that's turned up at the hospital because the rest all panicking, running around like headless chickens. The rider crashes at the CT. She was logical, left them, went there. So she was still functional at the time. And she turned up and I was lying there, and all these other guys that had hurt their ankles and all the rest were lying like you in the blue sheets with moaning. And I was like, I'm in pain, but I'm, loads of drugs up. And could feel my toes and all that. So she came there, we were there for a few hours. And I said, just help me up. So she got me up anyway, called the doctor. I said, can I go? They said, no, you can't go, you can't walk. I said, well, if I can walk. So if you can walk to the end of that hallway and phone a taxi, you can leave. And he thought, he's never going to do that.
Never test a biker.
No. So exactly. So I got her to help me. I've got my legs down. And I said, you can't help me like at all. So I said, Mom, can't help me. Don't help me in front of this doctor. So anyway, came back, got up, and I shuffled down to the thing, picked up the phone, rung the taxi, and the doctor said, listen, I'm not taking any responsibility for this. Anyway, taxi had to wait half an hour. I did the paperwork, gave me a few discipline or whatever it was. And the guy who turned up in the taxi was a guy that's called Ago. He's well known on the Isle of Man. He's a taxi driver. He rides in the Classic. Anyway, he took me back. All he was on about was the race. And I'm sitting there in agony, not wanting to talk about it. So we got back, and I remember nothing from then on till I got back to home here. I was staying here. And I don't remember any of the trip back, the ferry, nothing, because I remember just people were giving me more and more tablets to take away the pain. But the next weekend I had a BSB race at Snetterton. So I basically lay in bed until Tuesday. I didn't know what I was doing until Tuesday. And then I tried to fight with neighbours 3 doors down because they had a band on or something, which I normally used to go and listen to their band. So I was quite far gone. But I couldn't get there, so I couldn't walk down the stairs at the time. Anyway, I went into work. At that stage, I was working for Santander Bank. So I went into work in Ashby.
I keep forgetting your
I'm bank. So I had to go. I thought, I can't go racing. I'll get sacked. Go racing without going into work for a week because I said I've crashed a bike and then go and race again. They're never going to understand that, I took a few tablets, man. I was all right.
Yeah.
So I thought I need to go down. But everyone said, you're not going to race, because and also you won't pass the medical. So I went into the thing on Thursday and I had like 4 or 5 clients I had to see. But in between each client, I just lie on the floor. And I'd take more. I was grey, like taking tablets, sweating. Anyway, I got to Snetterton, did the medical, and made me do a stuff. I was on tramadol and all sorts, had to balance on one leg, got through. And I was in the hyperbaric chamber every night. If you look at the results, I thought it was like stone last, mid-group, or mid-pack, whatever it was, and I ended up qualifying like 12th or 8th, something like that. But anyway, in the race, I ended up finishing 3rd.
Shut up, man.
I swear to God, couldn't believe it. I don't know how. I don't know. It must have been really, really good, happy, because I struggled the rest of the year, you know what I mean, with that injury. But somehow, I think Snetterton's quite flat, so it meant, and if you watch who I was riding, I was like old
rigid
1960s. That's how I was, you know what I mean? One of those. So yeah, it was just crazy. And then because I was trying to, if you missed a round, the championship was gone. So little things like that. So that was like the part of the equation of when it's sort of not coming to an end, but you start realizing, and after that, it was completely my fault. The TT crash was just mentality changed, and then the error occurred. So
was that last crash at the TT the last time you rode there at the island?
I think it was the last time. I can't remember now.
Was that the deciding factor to stop you going back? Or
no, it wasn't. I might have gone back one more. I can't remember if I went back one more year after that. I can't remember now.
And
it was the last year.
Is that chapter kind of closed in your life, or are you open to the?
Well, I met Donna. You went to Northwest 200. I nearly did that year because I was going to do.
Yeah, you didn't actually do it.
No, because I signed with Ryan Farquhar to do.
I thought I upset you.
No, I signed with Ryan to do it all because exactly that, thinking, well, I just want to keep going. I still enjoyed the roads. I was going to do the TT and Northwest, but basically realised went and raced the bikes and did well at Bishop's Court. Did I think 1 on 1,000 and finished 2nd or 3rd on the Twin. And some tough competitors. But the point was that I realized without a BSB program or that many laps, I was going to be so rusty when I got there that I wasn't going to be up to speed. So I needed a program that I didn't have. And the team I was riding for was over there. So it meant reinvesting, And also the day I stopped at BSB when we left Knockhill, we left before the race because they were trying to basically move me to the back of the grid and all the rest of it. So I just said, listen, I'm done. Came back, reflected for a week. So that was the first race I'd ever missed. I'd never been injured for a race. Never missed a BSB. So I literally missed that race from the first time. All my whole career, I never ever missed a round from injury or anything.
I do kind of remember. I think I was in the paddock then. I remember there was obviously you just hear loads of chat about what happened.
Everyone says you're banned and this and that. Basically, all that happened. We've hired Knockhill since then. So the Knockhill officials, we finished the TT. I did do the TT one more time because we'd done the TT again. That was it. Yeah,
that year.
Then next year, so I went back. Yeah, that was it. And that was the catalyst. We did it. And I bought a brand new bike to finish the BSB season on. And because all the rigorous checks, it takes a long time to get all the ECUs sealed and all the stuff checked, which is fine. So we hired a rig to go there and be set up before because it's Knockhill miles away. And we drove up through the night, got to the main gate, had the new bike in the back of my little VW van. And what dawned on me, this is the same conversation I had with him in 2006. Do you know what I mean? When I had to wait 4 hours at the gate and didn't know anything and thought it was normal. Now I'm like 10 years on and I'm having the same conversation with the same people. And it was quite, so I was explaining, listen, all we want to do is get in and leave this bike as scrutineering. You can't drive it. Okay, well, I'll push the bike in. No, you can't push the bike in. I said, what am I meant to do? You need to move. And so it was this like weird negative conversation, which makes sense when you're looking at the thousands of people that need to be there. But individually, it made no sense to me. Like I'm paying 400 quid entry to be here. And I should just be like, you should help me push my bike there. If you see what I'm trying to say, that's the way it should be, not a load of attitude, if you see what I mean. And they always said, everyone said about shout and scream. I don't shout and scream. I never even swear when I'm dealing with people because of that professional outlook. And it was just logic. It was like no sense. So one of the things I did, I said, I'll just leave the van here until you decide what you want to do. So if you touch the van, you'll get arrested for theft. I said, so we can play top trumps all day long. I said, but whatever you want to do, guys. So eventually they let us in. Eventually they caved and just said, yeah, just take your motorbike to Scrutineering. Thank you very much. Because we've been driving 6 hours to come to the side of a hill in Scotland and ride motorbikes and paying you 450 quid for the privilege.
Yeah.
So like, if I'm at a rock concert, I'm getting a little bit emotional if there's a queue. You know what I mean? So that was my, and obviously that wasn't the first time. At every racetrack you got to, when you own your own team, and I think you rode your own team was the year before.
I've done in the past.
Not last year. And the point is that when you start doing that and start to see all the other stuff that hinders those, because they ring you, they're not ringing a team manager. And so when you get called in, because someone's maybe misbehaved, one of your team guys has, had too many beers and had an arm wrestle he shouldn't have had or whatever, you're getting called up. So now you're the rider and the team owner. So you're seeing it from a different perspective. And that was so that was wrong. Then they tried to fine me, and then they said, well, you're stuff in the back of the grid, or you might not ride this race or whatever it was. I said, you know what, I'm not even interested. I'll pack my stuff and go. And then I left and reflected. And literally within a week, I could sell the bikes. I think those bikes were worth like 20 grand each. And all of a sudden, I thought I owned everything. And I sat back and I thought, I've got a significant amount of kit here. I sold it all and I've never been richer in my whole life. All those financial stories, that big payday you spoke to every factory team about, I just gave myself one by not going to the next race. Yeah. And I was like, why am I doing this? But I still wanted to ride. So hence why I wanted to do the roads. But the other problem what happened is the reason I cracked on that day was because I'd been at the TT, where when you drive into the paddock, everyone high-fives you.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? They're high-fiving you. The security guards are high-fiving you, talking about your practice the day before. You're having all the good crack with everyone. There's literally even the top bananas, top of the ACU, top of everyone. They're all treating you like a civilized human being. And I got to the next place, and there was individuals that run that paddock that were just treating you like you're something on the bottom of someone's shoe, and you're like, never ever is this right.
Yeah.
And that was, and I called them on it, in a very professional way, and that's what they especially don't like, So that was, they want you to rant and rave, and that's probably the whispers that they try to say. But if I'd ranted and raved, they would have had a black car, so it wouldn't have been. There was no rant, and I would have had a black car. You know what I mean? But it never got to that stage.
And then pole position.
Here's a good question for you then. Obviously, you've seen it from like the riders and the team manager perspective, and now that you run your own series
again,
have you sort of seen a flip side that you? There's a sort of have you seen it in a different light?
100%, and that's why I said it makes logical sense. I completely agree. When you see it from those guys' side, you look at the paddock, you just have to stand and then the dynamic of that many people, everyone's different. You know what I mean? So you don't want an individual who's, their specific problem that I've driven through the night and arrived there with a new bike isn't their problem. And if they say, well, there's 240 competitors here that all telling me the same story, it wouldn't work. But there has to be a middle ground. So yes, 100%, we see it, without boring everyone's noise complaints, we're trying to be the quietest series that we can be because we run a 24-hour event.
Yes.
So, and also the way forward is quieter bikes. And we have a series that can be the quietest and doesn't affect our performance. It definitely affects a 1000cc or a 650 twin because those are high performance vehicles. These bikes aren't, if you know what I mean. And they can live under these restraints and make a noise limit of roughly 90 dB, which is like an average road bike. But that still sounds okay with the British made system that we sort of recommend they go and buy. But the point is that, so you see people and then someone comes up to you and says, but my mechanic said this will work and it's 106 dB. So you see the opposite side where you're thinking, you don't realize you're putting everything at risk because of a story. So I 100% agree that
I think from like the, obviously I've worked as a teacher for a good number of years, and it's a little bit like that when you're a student and you think like your teacher's being like a dick for something, and you're like thinking like, and very much like there might be like saying something like, for example, the school I went to had like very, very strict rules on like you weren't allowed hair touching your collar, and all the time I was at school I was thinking like, what a ridiculous rule.
It's
like
actually affecting my education.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
And you have that type of conversation with your friends, like, why is that's not going to affect my thing? But then on the, like, seeing it from a different light and working in loads of different schools, the school I went to were like pedantic about your hair touching your eyebrows and touching your collar, and like would have like meetings with your parents over it and things. Because they were having the arguments about that, the big things where like the missing classes and swearing at teachers and all that never ever happened. Absolutely. Because like they were focusing on like petty little things.
100%.
And then and when I've worked in other schools which ignore the petty little things, they've then got massive problems where you've got kids like, you know, doing a lots worse. So like you see it from a different point of view.
You definitely need control. You can't. You got to have, you know, a lot of, like, for example, to run a series like the British Superbikes at that level. If you look at that, the professionalism that's involved there.
Oh, aye.
But they're actually running it on very low staff.
Yeah.
If you think about it, so when you know, so to achieve that,
a lot of the staff are volunteers.
Volunteers,
as well.
and so you drum that down, and you just think that's an amazing job. So as much as that, some of the cultures that are there are, you know, I don't agree with.
Yeah.
The point is, if you stand back, you have to 100% give credit. Like you said, if the school results are there, and the BSB type championship is head and shoulders above, you know, almost anything else in the world. I mean, even you compare it to World Superbike, it's still that the vibe you get there is probably more than if you go to a World Superbike round at another country. So it's amazing. Mm-hmm. But the flip side is, it's where you are. If you know where you are, is that in that moment. And I think there's a compromise. Yeah. Like there's definitely a middle ground. Oh, and I think it's also the way, like if you were from a teacher's point of view approaching that student, there's multiple ways of doing that. And that definitely had deteriorated because I'd done the same thing. I mean, the other thing that cracked me was we were having all this through the weekend because I wrote all the sessions, you know, while we're having this sort of ongoing debate and getting caught up and everyone's hearing stories. But I had a Facebook, social media, I had a Facebook memory come up and I was at Knockhill like that same weekend for like the past 6 years. And I'm like, would I be holidaying at Knockhill for the last 6 years of my life at this, you know, in the middle of summer? And the answer probably would be no. As much as I don't dislike the racetrack, it's unlikely I'd be there. And then that was the same. So I'd been following that circus for a long time and not going nowhere, you know, but that on a bad weekend. And then obviously with all those other factors and just being a bit logical, like getting the racer taken out of you, but just sort of made me think. And then obviously the week after when, you know, either not having to pay the bill, if you know what I mean, that was coming up, or then cashing out. It just made it such an easy decision. But then I want to go road racing again.
Yeah, that's the thing.
Looking back, are you happy you kind of made that decision then? And like,
yeah, I think everyone wants like a victory lap or something like that. I think that's the way you
want to put a bow on it, don't you?
Yeah, you look at like someone like Shane. You know, I think it's such a travesty that he didn't get that final year. But then again, you flip it on other side and you think, well, he would have just kept going. You know, Shane, he's if other than his injuries, probably still physically fit enough to ride a motorbike. You know what I mean? So
and be running for championships.
Yeah, absolutely. And this age thing's also, you know, changed. I had arm pump surgery after I finished BSB, and because of the classic bikes, I couldn't ride them with my arm. And then I realized I was actually holding myself back because I wasn't having that because I was scared to have it and this and that. Whereas when I had nothing left, things changed and I actually got a bit better at even riding or, you know, on a different motorbike. I didn't go back and test myself on the same bikes, but stuff moved on, and you realize that, you want something different, but you don't know. I mean, if you look at Rossi, he would want to have won the 10th championship, but he doesn't. I'm sure he's happy he won 9, but the point is, he still. So we all want something a bit more.
Yes,
it's very different from a
human nature, that, isn't it? Though.
Yeah, I think call ourselves pro sportsmen. That's, you always want that, don't you? I've watched the Brody, you know, scenario on you know, way he's done the NFL. He's doing another year at 40 odd years old. So all of that stuff, you can see that. You don't want to let it go but then will you go out in the right way? Yeah.
Now, I know loads of people will be tuning in for this purely for Freetech, like all the people on the Freetech page, 100%. And they'll be like, we're 1 hour 46 in and hardly been mentioned about Freetech.
Yeah.
Do you want to quickly?
Close it off
obviously,
it's shite. Let's skip it there.
You've brought this idea over to the UK, and it's been a phenomenon. It's like it's so popular, really good, big following.
Sure.
Do you want to give a quick sort of round off of like what the championship is, and like I know you've got new classes for this year as well.
For sure. I mean, basically we just born off the back of that, doing a bit of classic racing and literally just sitting there applying the same logic. How do we condense all the cost? It's almost impossible to do on a big bike with the way things are structured at the moment, but on smaller CCs it was possible. We helped run some endurance races out in South Africa where we used to take foreign riders, you know, riders from Europe, and encourage them to come out. And then we got opportunity before COVID started to do that, or I started the series, we wrote the rules. And the biggest problem was there were no bikes, there were no race bikes. So you start a race series unless you have there's this series is about a road bike being converted, which sounds easy, but when you start converting one, there's a lot of crap on them, you know, even though they're 125. So basically you can build a bike for as little as £1,000, maybe less, and still be competitive. And there's a class this year which ensures that with production. So you literally, as it came out, you're allowed to change tires. but the stuff isn't junk. You're running Moto3 slicks on the thing, or Moto3 wets, which we have a few wet races.
You can't outpower these tyres.
That's the beauty, isn't it? And they don't wear out. So suddenly your tyre bill's zero, or you can get 50 quid scrubs. And we did 18 hours on a set of slicks, and they still did a couple of practices after that in the 24 hours. So, we did our fastest laps at the end, when the sun came back up after that. So loads of stuff like that. Basically just keeps the cost down. And it's not an anti big bike scenario, because the biggest problem is trying to convert big bike riders to do this. But the beauty of it is it gives everyone from a youngster who's sort of needs laps to become the next 250 champion, Moto3 champion, or Talent Cup laps, because they're affordable laps. He gives them a chance, and it gives someone that's the other end of the scale, obviously someone like me who's ex-racer, but all the way up to a road bike rider who just wants to come race and can't afford to throw his Jix 1000 down the road, even if it's a 5-year-old bike. And it allows all of those guys to do that. The thing, you have problems because everyone thinks they can ride a 125 the same speed as someone else, even if it's the same bike. And you start to realize that you have to really pedal those. And you boys have both raced them and both done well. But there's little differences when you're riding, and I think, oh shit, I was behind Chrissy a few years ago in Mallory, and he was doing things that I wasn't doing. And then I don't know if I passed him, he learned anything of me, but we'd sort of battled for a few laps in the rain. And then you kind of get someone else who's who might be slower but doing something better in another area, and you can ride the bikes to your full potential. And then we ride everything from the really decent go-kart tracks right up to your big tracks like your Pembury's, Mallory's, and we're looking to expand it even more. But yeah, we also do we have done, and we've got another one this year, the 24-hour race, which is the only 24-hour race ever held in the UK.
I was about to say that was based in Teesside, wasn't it?
And again, it'll be there. We're looking at other venues in the future, maybe Isle of Man, stuff like that. So there's lots of options. They'll be good. Yeah, we nearly did that this year. And then we're also talking about doing a Spanish round. So there's evolution of like Andalusia and stuff like that we might go to. So there's, because we've done Africa before.
That'd be unbelievable, that.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's on the card.
Can I tell you what would be mega? You've just mentioned Andalusia, but when they join Almeria and Andalusia, so it's like how big's the lap?
Oh, it's like, huge. Yeah,
it's like about a 6 mile lap or something. Yeah, it's the biggest short circuit in Europe, probably. Yeah. It's huge.
Wow.
And that would be absolutely get on the phone to Kev Healy.
No, well, all these things are
in the
pipeline. So we're always working away at it. And the other ethos is that obviously anyone new that's watching, that you guys have been there. We try and do a bit of old school stuff, a few beers afterwards, and just take the edge off. But also
promotional ladies.
Yeah,
thing of the past.
Yeah,
everywhere else.
We have we've not ashamed
sticking
the tradition. Yeah. Well, she's back. Don't worry, she's back at the next round. We're not afraid to have a few promotional ladies. And if they're happy to come along, and promote our events, then we're happy to do. And I'll tell you now, it's a lot better having one of them start the race than one of these race officials.
That was chaos, that Mallory one.
Mallory was really because we left it to a race official. See, they let them blow a whistle and everyone went mad.
Oh no, that was unreal. That was so lucky. I tell you what, even go back to the Freetech, for people who want to know a bit more about it. But the mad thing about, shall I say, modern, like stock 1000, stock 600, anything like that. Imagine if you pick one of them bikes up, took it off the paddock stand, and let go of it. That's £1,000 bill.
Absolutely.
That's £1,000, like clip on, lever, clutch lever, fairing damage, everything. That's £1,000. You chuck one of these Freetechs at the scenery, you pick it up, you dust it off, you fire it up again and go, and it totally takes away the financial fear of it. Yeah. And the good thing is, now fundamentally, if you went and bought a 125, you'd only want to race it at your events.
Yeah, sure.
That's the truth. If you went out by yourself on that bike, it would be shit.
Absolutely.
It would be. There'd be no two ways about it. You'd be going, I've just wasted my money. But when you've got how many competitors?
Well, last round we had 80 guys, but on the short tracks we have 50 or 60. So it's a lot around. And then we have 100 at some of the big tracks. So.
Imagine 100 people doing the same speed.
Yeah.
You are you're just smiling for like hours and hours on end, and you just get constantly this rivalry, and I can't recommend it high enough. And like you say, you just get the huge range from like the Chrissy Rouses, the Tim and Tom Neves, and you get the Superbike lads.
You're learning off everyone. And it gives the average person, connectivity to that, because they won't be able to even last two corners behind you boys if you don't ride with one hand behind your back. You know what I mean? And obviously on a big bike, but obviously they're not that they a lot closer, but they get a look in, and then they go down the next straight if your bikes are the same speed as you. You know what I mean? And it's not, when you're with each other, it's not slow. You know what I mean? It's good. But if you're riding on your own, you'd be like, this is pain trying. But to be fair, I don't like even riding big bikes on my own. I prefer riding, in a group, in a pack. Yeah,
but you could go it's totally different. But like you say, that the range that you lot deliver is phenomenal, and it's a case of if it doesn't clash, me and him are jumping straight on the spot.
Well, we've got like a promo bike and a renter bike that we try and get people in. So we try to do everything we can to make motor racing accessible. That's the goal. But like I say, Kate's from everyone from youngsters that have just won some laps that have come along and literally kicked my ass by seconds a lap on a motorbike, that some ex-BSB lads are saying, well, we don't think our bike's as good. These lads have gone 2-3 seconds a lap faster, So that's a great side. And then you get everyone in the middle that races at club racing. There's loads of other stuff, but it's affordable laps. That's the biggest challenge we have in it, whether you're a pro rider or a club rider or trying to get into racing. Where do you go where it's not going to cost you a fortune to do a track day or something? I think our events are something like 70 quid a rider. Something ends up that's 70 quid to, part of your share would be 70 quid, and then you're probably using 20 liters of fuel and a set of 50 quid tires. And you might treat yourself to a new set of brake pads for 12 quid.
And bearing in mind, that's what I mean, though. And bearing in mind, this is a Honda. You could literally pull it, go race, and not give a flying shite about it. Park it up in the shed and go, I've got a gap in the calendar. Yeah. They are that robust of motorcycles. I think I can't recommend your racing enough. No. And bikes set on fire. There's loads of beer. There's fireworks at the end of the event. Yeah. It's
we try and do a little bit of everything. Other than we're trying to stop the guys from setting their bikes on fire when they're on the track. But
fair play for sort of putting that together. It has been really good for the UK. Now,
because if we're pushing it, can we get a free entry for the Spanish one? You know what I mean? We will push it.
Pay for your own hotel. We'll have a Chasin the Racin bike. Yeah, no problem.
Get it done. Now, this podcast, I've just been thinking about this just a second ago. It'll be going out on the Sunday after the first BSB round, so I think a lot of people will probably be tuning in. Sort of expecting all BSB. It will catch up after the following week. But obviously, it's been a long off season and really looking forward to the first round, proper buzzing. We've both been out on bikes recently. There was the BSB test last Wednesday and Thursday, I think.
Wednesday, you were down in Silverstone, weren't you?
Down in Silverstone, and you've been out. Do you want to talk about being out for your maiden run?
At Darley Moor, I saw it. Just got the BM out, and I tell you what, on the Saturday I was riding a 40 brake horsepower Honda K4. Hopped on that thing, I shit myself. There's no two ways about it, but it is a phenomenal bike.
Fast racetrack as well.
Darley Moor's a miniature Northwest, isn't it? And I was out on standard pads and stuff like that, and I'm just going into turn one, going stop. It was. I tell you what, I do love them bikes, but it just shows the level and the skill set that you need to ride one of them properly.
Yeah.
And it's in the last couple, over the last 2 years, I've only been on a big bike twice. You know what I mean? But that was with the DC lads. So I'm very grateful for what they did there, but you need that repetition.
Yeah.
And it's a bit
it's all about laps. You got to build all the way. That's the testing that both of you don't know, but Chrissy's been at that high level. We had Brent Herron come ride with us, and and he just come off the test and you could see little differences. You can see his razor sharp, you know what I mean? But it's all because they've been building, and that big bike stuff, you have to be, don't you? Like you saw today, it's mind-blowing.
That's exactly it. And it's being able to go onto that, but it just shows like you were just saying, that edge, and what you've been doing has been phenomenal, because that's actually going to your test now. That's your second time on the bike. On the superbike. So how are you finding that then? Jumping from that level.
When people listen to this, it'll be after the first round, so it'll be sort of slightly outdated.
This is a waste of time.
The test went a good couple of days. It was mega windy on the second day. First time I've ridden in winds that strong for a long time, but where soon as the wheel picks up, it blows you at the side.
Did someone get knocked off?
There was a
Coops was telling me someone got knocked off.
The wind, it was as you were going into
Cape Town wind I was telling you guys about.
It was full on moving your. Yeah, it was horrendous. If you were following people down the straight, everyone was leaning left going down the straight, but then when you got to the bridge, obviously there was no wind, so you started actually turning left. It was very bad. But overall I thought the test was good. Just a few quick mentions. Tara McKenzie had a massive high side through the last corner. It was absolutely horrendous.
Just stepped off the curb.
No, I've actually seen pictures. It was high side through the last corner.
He high-sided
lost the rear, and then it flicked him over the front.
Caught it, and then he went again, didn't it? It was twice as big.
But absolutely massive crash, and hurt himself again. So sending our best wishes to Taryn. I'm sure he'll be back fit very soon.
He's a special lad. I saw him when he was very young. He used to come ride his small bikes with us all over, and you could see. I mean, Taylor was also good, but Taryn was younger and faster.
Yeah, it was awesome.
He's always faster.
Also, people who were kind of going well, it was actually Tommy Bridewell who topped the overall test, and other sort of other people that did well. The OMG lads, both really competitive.
They
I
are
think they were
loving them Yamahas.
top 4. Also,
that's the championship winning bike from last year. I was reliably told by Steve Rogers they bought the bike from Jason's or Taz's, but they bought one of them.
Iden was also going well, and that's Silverstone Nationals, very much a Suzuki track. I think Danny Kent had COVID. So he missed the test, but he'll be right up the sharp
I think the Suzuki should be better than it has been. There's lots of reasons why. Only down the road, but that bike's developed. So, there's tracks where, we're talking about the difference between bikes before, but that bike's in the window, which if it's working, should be there.
Yeah, it's mega, right? Especially at that track, and there's a few more that it sort of does well at. But yeah, definitely, historically, it's done very well there anyway.
Is there any new tyres coming in? Because I saw on the No Limits endurance, they brought out a Pirelli 3.
Sizes. There's some, it's compounds.
We've got a new SCX tyre
which
now.
Is softer.
Yeah, which is even softer than one before. Now, it's not applicable at Silverstone because Silverstone tears up tyres there in Thruxton, so everyone has to run the 0 tyre there, so it doesn't make any difference. But everywhere else you can run the...
If it's warm, you could probably get into that window at a track which is rubbered and, maybe not round 1. But
that's one thing I need to learn a lot more about, because I've got no experience with choosing compounds and stuff, but I'm reliably informed that most people ran the X for race distance last year. However, at the Silverstone test, most people were saying... I wasn't running the X, but most people were saying they were getting like sort of 5-6 laps and then it was shredded. So that'll be that's like another factor that when you go from Superstock to Superbike, it's like a new thing that you have to work out for yourself.
It's phenomenal what tyres can do to this game, because like a lot of people won't even know that like the hotter it goes, the softer you go, and then the colder it is, the harder you go, and you think
well, we were saying before there how like us as riders we get drawn into that and then we focus it after the race with people asking us questions, but it's something you almost need to know before the race, but you're so after a test, you become technical.
Also, Skinner was really impressive.
He was
Rory Skinner was flying, and also Josh Owens was doing exceptionally well. I'm not sure where he finished overall, but he was definitely seems to have made a step from last
That's the
year.
Next generation again coming. If you know what I mean, it's getting stacked at the top.
Young lads, and obviously Sykes came back, and Leon Haslam both from World Superbikes. I think Haslam was somewhere near the top of the sheets. Sykes was a little bit off. But I'm sure come race day.
But it's close around that track. It's a tough one to call.
I mean, I was 21st overall, and I was less than 9/10 off, like 8. So I was really like 0.898 off.
So what do you? Because you've just done that, turning the tables on you. What do you need? What do you think you'd need to make that step? Obviously, I'm not trying to say you're not going to blow them away by 0.8 of a second.
Yeah, well, to be fair, all the times were massively off. So I would expect everyone to be a lot faster. If the weather's a little bit better, I would expect, but. Obviously, it's a fair comparison because you're on the track at the same time, and I mean, obviously, there's areas where I can improve this a bit that we can get more out of the bike. But overall, I would say I'm just slowly kind of building into it, and not I'm not being greedy in terms of like pushing the front, lean angle, accelerating really hard on the edge of the tire. I'm almost kind of starting off with what I would do with a Superstock tire, and then just every single session I was going out, I was just kind of asking a tiny bit more. A couple of times, like saying to turn 1, the front started to tuck, and I sort of saved it on my knee, and then you think to yourself, okay, that's where that is, and then it's just tiny little bits, but. Yeah, and that's kind of how I'm starting the season. And by that, I mean the first.
You just don't want any dramas when you're that
season.
thing. You just want to chip away, and then, like you say, that one's always going to feel hopefully better because you're close by.
Yeah,
it's the longer tracks where you want to still stay in that bracket, and then if you build to that,
to be honest, the first race weekend, in terms of like I've got no experience. I did a long run at Silverstone. I ended up getting like 22, 23 laps in, but Taron red flagged the session, so I didn't actually do a full race distance. But I've got no experience doing a full race distance on them tires on that bike, so it's going to be a huge learning curve. Obviously, like I say, when people are listening to this, it's going to be after the first round.
It's backwards thinking this.
But I am very much looking forward to it. When are you next out?
Same weekend as you, so Melville, it's already come and gone, so hopefully it's gone mint. Hopefully.
He reminds me of Marty McFly.
Nike trainers the job lot.
Are you on the big bike there as well?
Yeah, just a big bike. I'm trying to just get as much track time as I can. I'm desperate for it. Absolutely desperate for it. But I'll tell you what, I'm going to add a little thing to the show.
Go on.
I want everyone to pick a rider of the week. No, a rider of the week. And it doesn't matter have a performance, no nothing. Who's outstood
this week gone by?
This week gone by, before.
I think best is Inye from the MotoGP now. I think for winning that, he's for me. Sorry to jump.
Right, there we
stealing
are. No.
Yeah, go on.
Yeah.
Good. I would say Bautista being off the boil on the Honda for a good few years now, and then returned. And we haven't even mentioned World Superbikes, but
we haven't even watched that yet, so we'll have to bring that up.
To come back and be back right at the front, battling for the race wins. What about you, John?
It's got to be 100% Stephen Parsons. If you haven't heard of him, he's won a Manx Grand Prix, right? Yeah. And he's just been battling leukemia for a couple of years, and he's back, and he's only got a handful of weeks to get his mountain course license to go. He's riding for the Wilcox Racing team on a BMW Gen 3, his own 600. Brilliant. The lad is he's been approved medically to go racing again, but the determination of that lad, he was chasing Richard Cooper around at Darley Moor this weekend. Don't get me wrong, Richard was, bridged the gap.
Richard's on fire at the moment. That's what Richard's been riding away. He did a Mallory race.
There you are. Yeah, exactly. So Parsons in second at Darley, you just think, you know what? There's a man who's the living embodiment that life is too short. He's dragged himself through hell, and he's gotten the other side of it and gone, you know what? I love bikes.
I want to go racing.
And that's what he said. That's it, though. And he's not just going, I want to make up the numbers. He
wants to go racing. Yeah,
that's it. So my rider of the week is 100% Stephen Parsons.
That's a good show.
100%.
I'm just having a quick look at the World Superbikes. I haven't actually had a chance to watch the racing, but I've sort of seen a few of the results. Top three from. Can I go for it? Or you
go for it. No,
go for it. Just
so
pull
first
it
race, Jonathan Ray, Bautista and Toprak. The Super Pole race, Bautista, Jonathan Ray and Toprak, and then race 2, Bautista, Jonathan Ray, Toprak. So Toprak,
I wonder who.
Then so championships looking Bautista 57, Jonathan Ray 54, so really tight. Toprak 39, bit of a jump, and then Rinaldi. Then both Honda riders. So Honda have been miles off, and
they're closing the gap now.
They both of them lads have came from MotoGP, haven't they? And it was a sort of. A big change in the team, but that's obviously looking like it's paying off, and fair play to them. And a big sort of, I know we've been talking about it a lot over the off-season, Scott Redden, very sort of...
He was 15th in one of the races, I saw that.
That was his best result around. So he's on 1 point.
And what he's 18th. Capable of as a rider, you know what I mean?
Not gelling. Not clicking yet.
And Loris Baz is actually the highest BMW rider in 9th at the moment. And I'm just quickly looking through...
Well, they said the Ducati was blowing past the Kawasaki. Well, I saw it was going past the Kawasaki.
That's with Bautista on, to be fair.
Yeah, he's only a little.
Yeah, he's
on the fastest bike, so it's going to happen. Yeah.
Just to wrap things up, we've got a quick Patreon question. Jesse Mortimer: is there anywhere other than eBay or Gumtree that I can pick up a bike for the 125 endurance race? Also, on that note, what would you suggest is the best bike to start with?
I think the best. You guys have both rode Hondas before, and they do the job. At the moment, there's a bit of a swing towards the Suzukis, but they just steer it to bike because they're newer bikes. The Hondas are more affordable, and then you can go from there. And the Honda gives you lots of options. So Honda, for me, the CBR 125 carburetor or injection do the same job.
Where's the best place to get one?
Just look around. I mean, thing is,
if you go to a car park like behind a Sainsbury's, there'll be someone riding around. Just push them off.
I think you sort of Facebook Marketplace. The only problem with the 125 is they've generally not been washed. So the older they are, they're probably the more rust that's on them. Yeah. So you just got, if you buy a cheap one that's full of rust, you just got to accept that you need to have some mechanical knowledge to be able to loosen rusty bolts, because every one of them is going to be rusty. That's the problem.
We've got one off Ryan Garside. Quick fire questions.
He's a huge cheat at your event. You'd really like him. You'd love me saying that.
Yeah, we get on. We get on well at the pub afterwards.
I was about to say, he always gets the whole shot at your events.
Yeah, if
you haven't noticed.
Yeah, somehow.
So
you'll be watching this going, you bet, like,
That's allowed to push on his bike last time. And if you watch the start, we've got a clip of it. He has to go down the pit wall, and he begged for them. I said, you can't have that again. You know what I mean? He ran 3 people over.
We rode for him at the last one.
He's a fella, mate.
So quick fire questions. One or the other, no half answers. So left or right?
What did he say?
So it's one or the other. You've just got to say one.
Left or right? Right.
Interpret it how you like.
Yeah, right.
Super stock or super sport?
Super stock.
Suzuki or Honda?
Suzuki.
Cricket or rugby?
Rugby.
South Africa or Ashby de la Zouch?
Oh, Ashby de la Zouch. No, I'd say that. Yeah, Ashby de la Zouch. Yeah.
Brad Binder, Darren Binder.
Brad.
And time travel or invisibility?
Time travel.
Chrissy or Dom?
That was actually the question.
Was it really? I want to say both at the same time.
I would have said Chrissy.
I was personally going to say
both. I'm going to say both at the same time, just like twins.
Yeah. So and he's just put long live the no insurance endurance. So we're doing a great job. Now, just before we wrap up, just a quick one that we've recently done a collaboration with Bennett's, and so throughout this.
If you could not tell by a shirt,
throughout the year, we're going to have like a lot of like sort of giveaways and stuff with the podcast. Obviously, the title sponsor for the British Superbike, so there's a big tie in there. They're also sponsoring, I think it's the lightweight TT. Or it's one of the TTs they're sponsoring, so they're going to have cool things that we can link up with there, and obviously do track days at the BSB, do loads of things with customers and stuff, like the experience days and stuff. So I'm hoping that'll be a good way of like sort of giving our listeners something back.
Absolutely, we know what to do that. I mean, they do their days. I've been to a few are mega. I mean, they're next level. So if you guys can offer that through them, it's really good for your listeners.
Now, other than the Freetech series, if you like, that you look after, is anything else that you kind of involved with or promoting or anything at the moment?
Just, I mean, for me, that was the main thing to sort of kill. Obviously, we've been through a funny couple of years, and we've been able to keep racing a lot of the time when we were allowed to legally, so that helped us a lot. But it's kept me sane as well, and I showed you boys the garage earlier, but there's a shed at the back which is full of filings, which is all where the grinding happens, shall we say, or the loosening of the rusty bolts.
Scrap man's coming around later.
Exactly. Well, it was a scripture not too long ago. So yeah, it's that sort of stuff. That's all. And you sometimes think you're old before your time, but it's sometimes the simple things. So that keeps me happy. But I have looked at doing other stuff. Maybe I want to look at that European classic racing. That's sort of open up to 92. So ZX7s, OWOs, RC30s a bit out of my price range, but that's some sort of superbikes that were just before my time. But that's also a great little series, which is and they're going to ride at cool tracks, Le Mans, Spa. That's nice, and nice bars.
That sounds like right up your.
Well, we might do just touching on that because of Spa. We might there's a mega a short track in the middle of Spa, so we're looking at putting a race on there. So
my God!
But I want to go to Spa anyway, you know what I mean, just to ride the big track. But any excuse to go is my point. That's what I'm trying to do.
You sound like set up an event around it, clever thing, and get around the
especially I'm loving the Spain idea of the Freetech in Spain, and I think that would just be carnage.
But a warmth when it's a bit cool. Yeah, that's the idea.
Definitely. And just before we wrap things up, I just want to quickly mention that a while ago, a good friend of mine, Lundy, who kitted this van out, suggested that we went skydiving and sort of pushed us into it. And I decided, so ages ago, we booked to do our AFF course and did our training a few months ago, did a refresh the other day, and today there was the first time I actually got to jump out the plane. So I got 3 jumps in. I think he got 4 jumps, and
did you land?
Yeah, I had to take these off before because obviously your ears pop like loads and stuff, and like you're trying to
trying to come back to it.
But it was easily one of the best things that I've ever done in my life. It was absolutely incredible.
It's a buzz, isn't it?
I'm still like wired off it now. And when I came, like the instructor, one of them like flew in front of us, and he just, when we got back, he was like laughing with all of his mates because he said he kind of like would jump out the plane and you accelerate to like over 100 miles an hour flying through the air, and he went in front of us, and I just had like the biggest smile on my face.
The cheeks left flapping away. Yeah.
It was absolutely amazing. And that the thing when you decide to pull, so like 6,000 feet, you pull, and obviously there's that big deceleration, and then it's just blissfully peaceful, quiet.
Floating.
You can see right out the North Sea. You can see for miles all over the country, spot things, and you've just got about like 5 minutes of just peaceful, just so beautiful. And honestly, I can't recommend it highly enough for anyone if anyone gets a chance to do it.
Once a kick. Yeah, kick of adrenaline.
Oh yeah, it's unreal. You've already done it.
I've done 6 solo jumps. Yeah. So
I've done a lot of like base jumping off stuff, like in Cape Town. There's a few peaks where you jump and you float down. So
I want to do base jumping. That would be a rush because it's a lot lower.
It's that like, when it takes your breath away, and it's like just that. It's like a feeling that I guess it'll probably end up being like a bit of an addiction. But
it's the same. You're getting the same kicks on you. That's when you've raced motorcycles or done scary stuff, you sort of you need it. You need a kick every now and then.
John Hopkins' bookie got into the I think it's base jumping, but with the suits. Have you seen that?
The wingsuit.
Yeah, the wingsuit flying. Yeah. But I mean, that's like, that's again, it's like another level. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely unreal. Anyway, have you got anything else to wrap?
Yeah, I've actually got to say a massive shout out to one of our listeners, Simon Carter, and Jason Griffiths there, from the Metzler family of the Pirelli. They've actually, I'm on board with them for the roads campaign this year, so I must say thank you very much to them lads, and getting some support from that end of it. So Jason's
always been a big, he used to race obviously. That's it. He was someone else that I watched before, but like when I was talking about, but yeah, he's and it's great to see him. He's always put back in, isn't he? He's always been in
100%. And he's a very busy man, because we want to try and get him on the show one day. He's agreed to come on the show. It's just trying to tie him down when he's not busy, that's it. Looking after everyone in the BSB paddock. It's a full-time babysitting gig, isn't it? Let's face it. There you go. But no, I'm looking forward to it because I've never done the Isle of Man on Metzlers before.
It's more stable than the other brands. That's the one advantage.
That's it, because I've always gone around in the Dunlops, just where they always guaranteed a 6-lap tyre, and that's why I went down that route. Yeah. So
saving money, I like it.
Christ die, son, Christ die. So,
what did you do, TT on?
Tyres? I swapped the Triumph. I had to run on the Metzlers or Pirellis because, Metzlers, Metzler was a tyre because it would shake too much on the Dunlops. You literally couldn't ride a Triumph on Dunlops. Tried to. And the big bikes, I used both. Dunlop lasted a bit better. The Pirellis or Metzlers were always more stable. So it was whatever. If you're physically fitter, you could get away with the Dunlops. But the Pirelli gave you an easier ride. But yeah, you just have to choose. But we would pit on the Metzlers. We would always change tyres. I think my best results were probably on the Metzler.
There we are then. So exciting times.
They're very close now. There's if you look
what Dean Harrison and Dean Harrison, Pete Hickman. There's Dean Harrison flying around at nearly a 135.
I think Hutchie's done the same amount of wins on both.
There used to be a time when I think the Dunlop we just had they had the outright pace. It might have been easier for someone like a newcomer like me at the time to ride on a different tyre, but the outright pace to do that lap time, you would have needed a Dunlop. But definitely the other boys at Upton. I even raced around there on Michelin's.
Right.
Yep. Tried them. They came on board, same as you. Also wanted to save a few quid. That was interesting.
There we are. That was interesting. The term was interesting. There we go.
No, they were okay. It's just that no one had any data. So they were there. They tried really hard, but it's quite a big event to go and not develop a tyre. But there's probably 20 sort of tyres to choose from. So
I tell you what, I'm particularly looking forward to though. Seeing not Dunlop. Give me another name. McGuinness
back.
McGuinness is back as well as he's on Metzlers.
Has he changed? Okay, didn't know that. Because he's a Dunlop man.
He was practically, if you cut him in half, you'd have Dunlop written through him. So it'll be interesting.
They should have put another 0 at the back of their check. He would have stayed on Dunlop.
That's it. Well, I think it's more the Honda decision element of it, So it'll be good to see him, and then Hutchie's back.
But the bike will be set up as well, won't it? That's the other thing. There's a crossover now, and the other thing is, if you think Honda before in the roads, they always had that data rolling, but now we've had this big gap where the bike's changed.
Brand new bike, isn't it?
And so there's no data. So that was one of the big advantages they had over, other brands. You look when Norton came at one stage, they spent a lot of money. They were trying everything, but they didn't have the sort of momentum from data. Yes. And the one bike sort of as it moved into the next, they knew what had worked before. When the BMs came, Michael obviously got that going, but a lot of the other guys sort of struggled, but then it moved forward again. So, if the bike's got momentum, but if you set up on certain tyres, it makes sense.
I tell you what, that's a very interesting argument, because the only person that's going there with momentum based on that is Hickman. Yeah. He's gone around there on the Dunlops, on his BM. Yeah. Harrison is making the change from Metzlers to Dunlops this year, so he's got on the ZX10 though. So it's a little bit different. And then Dunlop is on the Ducati, a very hard chassis on Dunlops.
Yeah, he's on a Ducati for the Superbike, and then he's on a Honda for Superstock.
He's on a Honda for Superstock, isn't he? And
he's testing,
And Hillier and Davo, they're on the Yamahas, both on the Metzlers. But you see, Hillier's always been a Metzler man. He's, it's always Jamie Coward's on the R1.
But that should be good. The R1, I think, will be good around there.
But Jamie's done a 130 round there on those same tyres. But I tell you what, speaking of we were talking about BSB outside bets. We'll have to ask you that question as well. But I tell you who's going absolutely fantastic, Craig Neve. And he's seeded at number 20. And he's looking seriously strong. Nathan Harrison, he's looking strong. There's loads of people who are going to mix it up this year. It's looking good.
It's going to be interesting, because also with that break, no one's ever had that so much time away from there, because all the top lads were going there doing the classic. They were, John was going over there walking his dog at times, over the mountain, just to see if there's any more potholes, doing the sort of Joey thing where you put your secret markers down and all that sort of stuff. And I can tell you now, all of that helped. Every one that's been a newcomer there, if you didn't have that, you don't even understand how they did it before that training program existed, because the track's so immense. It's just, it's like trying to do the Dakar without a map. You know what I mean?
Jesus,
it'd be impossible.
when you put it like that,
it's the same, and it's so, and there's so many little tricks also, going so fast. So the fact that there's been a gap, it's going to be very interesting who gets back to that speed.
I'm personally relying on it because, like I was saying before, I've been on a big bike twice in 2 years, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And then you think, well, we're going to the Isle of Man. I'm hopefully the Isle of Man will play its Enigma card and go, right, this is the rock. But
that's how the week goes, isn't it? How the practice goes.
Of course it is. Of course it is. But when you think you got the lads who have been able to afford to do British for 2 years, that edge is going to be there. So it's and like you say, the live streaming coming in, and it's a good time to be alive.
Even if you're having a bad day at the Isle of Man, just think of me. I was there on a Buell, trying to race around. Now that makes your bad day look good. And that's all I'm going to say about that.
There you are. Simple as that. Simple as that.
Is the Buell the one that didn't have fork? It had a swinging arm at the front.
It had a swing. I think it had a cantilever. I think this one, when eventually got there, it had normal suspension, but it was a V, but it was a crazy V. So basically, the problem was the way the engine rotated, which you didn't know till you got to the Isle of Man, was it didn't. If you leant it down at that speed, it didn't want to pick back up, or vice versa. It didn't want to lean over.
No wonder you needed arm pump surgery. It's all from that one Buell ride.
It was horrendous, and they were a little bit slower than.
They used to race in World Superbikes.
Yeah, it was the same bike. It was the same bike.
They had like this really like a crazy passionate fan club that used to go to every. I think it was at Americans.
Yeah.
They used to go to every single World Superbike round, and these two Buells would be going round last and second last every single race. But the fan club were like just so passionate about them.
The team Buell was obviously having its financial problems, and that split team bought those two Buells, the World Superbike ones, because they stopped World Superbike like a month before the TT. But we had them there, but no one knew how to start them. So we had them in the garage, but we rode like converted road bikes. But the problem is they were right on the road until you try and take them to that level. And they were really cool. From a cool factor, there are lots of cool things, but they just weren't up to speed for that. Maybe the proper race spec might have been different, but with all the heavy stuff and the way that engine worked, it wasn't good. And then the engine started blowing up. So I don't think I know we probably went through 8 engines between me and Mark Miller.
Jesus.
I was thinking, my engine's still fine, and then 2 days later,
off it goes.
You come back and be knocking like a little 125 that's been revved for 25. Thinking that's not right.
Something's off here.
Yeah, something's not good. So there's interesting times, but think about that to make you feel better.
There we go. I tell you what. Before we wrap up the show beautifully here, we're going to ask who's your championship favourite for the BSB.
I see that's a tough one. I think short answer, Chasin the Racin. I think
doesn't want him to win it.
I think he's I just think what he showed last year. If it was over a whole year, it's a definite. You know what I mean? Because he's going to develop. It's just the way that format is. They're still running the showdown where that just gives everyone a fair chance, which makes it exciting, no question. But someone who's Mr. consistently fast, they're all good guys, all fast. There's no one in the whole race that's not fast. But the point is, he's always going to deliver. And the problem is, if you look at it, he just had a few rounds where there was rain and all the rest of it. And he's got an irritating part where his teammate is arguably one of the fastest riders. He's just got inherent sort of at the moment still going through some sort of experience, crashing, hopefully that comes right, and also injuries. If you have that sort of Marquez-ish thing where you ride right on that edge all the time, you're more danger, aren't you? But O'Halloran for sure.
O'Halloran for there we go. Awesome.
We've already done our picks, haven't we?
Oh, I think we keep.
Who did you
it's
say?
like fantasy. To be honest, mate, it keeps changing that many other times. I've got my opinion is
before
void.
the testing started. I think I said O'Halloran for my firm favourite, and Bradley Ray is my outside bet. I think
the other two Yamahas for sure. I think it's for me consistency wise the 4 Yamahas.
Oh no, sorry, I said Leon Haslam.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, I went for Leon. Yeah, because can you remember I said Leon Haslam and Christian said really? Can you remember? Yeah.
No, I'm not against as an old boy, I love the old boys, but I just don't. I think the job's moved on now.
I also think, and this is from being out on track with them as well. I personally think Rory Skinner's going to be like mega this year.
He is.
Yeah, I think all those, the two OMG Yams will be rapid because those boys they're so hungry, aren't they? You know what I mean? And they've now got the same kits as the Raceways boys, so the bikes are the same. So the 4 riders,
Brooksy looks well up for it as well.
Yeah, I think he's got a point to prove.
100%. 100%.
So much, but I just still think the Osho after last year and what happened, he's going to have that little bit of fire
Gotta hope he brings it home.
Supporting the Southern Hemisphere, right?
I can't be, yeah. Do you see that? And that should, I should know. But
This is how much you've grown up.
I should go against them, shouldn't I? Just all my training for as a schoolboy should be
It's just
dead
gone out
against
the
that.
window.
Yeah, no, I'm going against everything.
Your old man will be listening.
Quality, I love it.
Class, man.
Excellent. Well,
Thank you guys for having me.
I've got one more shout out. Tom from Motul. He's the perfect man to speak to about polishing your helmet and lubrication.
Yeah.
I promised him I'd shout him out there, so there you are, Tom.
He lives around here. I've cycled with him a few times. They all come out on the road. If you go cycling around here, you bump into everyone. There's a Mackenzie down there, Tom's down there, Towers is down that way. Honestly, they're all over the shops. Eddie Roberts lives down there if you want to get some old Pirellis from 3 years ago. Yeah,
Fantastic. 3 years ago. Class, man. Absolutely class. But obviously, thank you to our sponsors, Colchester, Kawasaki, all our patrons. I've just nicked that line from Chrissy. I felt wrong. No, seriously, this is not right. Seriously, can you finish that off? I feel dirty.
Massive thanks. And massive thanks for your time as well. I've thoroughly enjoyed that. Cool. So and look forward to catching up at a Freetech event.
Yeah, we'll look forward to seeing you guys there.
And now we'll get off your drive. See you in a bit.
Chasin the Racin. Powered by Colchester Kawasaki, part of the Global Moto Group. We supply new Aprilia, Moto Guzzi, Vespa, Royal Enfield, Kawasaki, Sim, Mutt and Benelli motorcycles.